We from Narcissus Island will not offer a resolution, Elder Lingi said with absolute firmness, and she had enough reasons to do so. It was because Narcissus Island was on the side of reason that she could stand her ground. Lingi, what do you mean by that? Are our sect geniuses meant to just die in vain? Hanyun growled softly. It's a shame that your disciples died, but they're to be blamed for not being skillful enough. Narcissus Island can't take the blame. After all, they were the ones who took the initiative to snatch Jian Wushuang's position tokens. He couldn't just not defend himself and present his head to the others, could he? Elder Lingi said. Hearing her words, they could not argue even though those experts were angry. The fact that they were coveting for what another person had obtained and tried snatching it away, but only to get killed instead due to their own technical deficiencies. That was not something they could blame the other person for. You're right, Lingi. The competition for position tokens has always been something we leave up to fate. Our disciples died from their own undoing and could only blame themselves. If that's the case, since Jian Wushuang possesses 3 position tokens, that would mean it's equally feasible for our Great Compassion Sect disciples to kill him during the token snatching process, said Hanyun. Of course, it's a battle of opportunities, and there are bound to be occurrences of deaths, said Elder Lingi. Very well then, we're glad to have your word. Let's go. Hanyun waved his hand before those experts from the Great Compassion Sect turned around and left. As for the remaining other sects' experts, they could do nothing else but to follow suit after seeing that the Great Compassion Sect leaving despite still feeling dissatisfied. Elder Lingi, Elder Wujian, and 7th Elder gathered immediately upon the departure of those experts. 2nd Elder, it's apparent that Hanyun wants Jian Wushuang to die in Saint's tomb from his words. Why didn't you stop him? Elder Wujian frowned. Elder Lingi's voice lowered. Stop him? How to stop him? Jian Wushuang had a run-in with so many sects at once and got into such a big trouble. It's fortunate that this happened over the fight for opportunities and it wouldn't implicate Narcissus Island. However, if we still force our way through and defend him, how do you suppose we could negotiate with sects like the Great Compassion Sect? Are we to just watch the Great Compassion Sect destroy Jian Wushuang? Elder Wujian was not having it. It's something that can't be helped. He was the one who got himself into that mess and will have to bear the consequences. We from Narcissus Island could help him within our means. As for whether he could overcome this ordeal, it really depends on himself, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian kept quiet upon hearing that. Indeed, that was too big of an issue, making it impossible for Narcissus Island to completely defend Jian Wushuang. Wujian, you have the best relationship with Jian Wushuang among us 3, and also the only person who has his message token. Go ahead and have a good talk with him. Tell him what just transpired here, just so that he has some prior preparation, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian nodded slightly and took out Jian Wushuang's message token. Jian Wushuang. Elder Wujian immediately sent him a message. Elder Wujian, I knew you would immediately look for me. Jian Wushuang replied very soon with his absolutely calm tone. You've got into a big mess. Why are you not worried at all? Elder Wujian surprisingly said. Wasn't that about killing just 1 or 2 genius disciples? What's the big deal? Jian Wushuang smiled. What do you mean 1 or 2? You've killed a total of 70 to 80 geniuses from close to 20 sections. That aside, the most important part is that you even killed Pang Tao. He's from the Great Compassion Sect and the personal disciple of Fan Jianxian, said Elder Wujian. Jian Wushuang remained smiling. What's done is done. It's useless to regret. Elder Wujian, perhaps the reason you sent me a message is that you've been pressured by those other sects and the Great Compassion Sect. Am I right? Elder Wujian nodded. Yes. Just a while ago, the Great Compassion Sect and those others came up to us. Even though we had sent them off, Narcissus Island can't forcibly protect you. After this, the Great Compassion Sect and their lot will find every means to make a move on you in Saint's tomb and avenge their disciples. Especially the Great Compassion Sect. You have to know a total of 30 Great Compassion Sect disciples have gone into Saint's tomb. Among them are 9 first-class divine demon, which includes Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing, who are both listed in the 12 minor kings. They will definitely join forces to avenge Pang Tao's death. Aside from that, I'm afraid every sect's disciples in Saint's Tomb has already caught wind of the 3 position tokens in your possession by now. Even if they have no enmity against you, they will still seek you out just to snatch those position tokens from you. Which means that you have probably become everyone's target in Saint's Tomb. Everyone's target, huh? Jian Wushuang reacted but without any sense of surprise. Setting the sect's grudges aside, it was only natural that he would have become everyone's target for just having 3 position tokens in his hands. Jian Wushuang, you need to constantly be careful in Saint's Tomb from here on. We from Narcissus Island can't help you too much. You can only rely on yourself. If push comes to shove, just give up on those 3 position tokens. If the situation is worse than that, just use Pang Tao's safety token and protect yourself. Although that would mean missing your chance to access the most precious opportunity in Saint's Tomb, it's always better than throwing your life away, said Elder Wujian. Jian Wushuang nodded. Understood. Oh yes, there's something I would like to ask Elder Wujian for help. It's about my parents. Aha, you're right. The tactics that these sects used are sometimes not exactly honorable. If they couldn't get you out in the open, they might play dirty like making a move on your parents. Don't worry, I shall send people to relocate your parents just to ensure they're all right, said Elder Wujian. Well then, thank you for your efforts, Elder Wujian. Jian Wushuang was relieved. He was not worried about his own safety, but of his current lifetime's parents. As long as his parents were protected, he would feel more settled. Inside Saint's Tomb, all the disciples of Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple gathered around. How was it, little brother? Zhuo Bing and the rest looked at him. They knew that Jian Wushuang was communicating with an elder from Narcissus Island. It's as I predicted. Those sects couldn't involve Narcissus Island on this issue, but they would do whatever it takes to seek me for revenge. In addition, news of me possessing 3 position tokens has gone out. For the remaining period, I'll become the target of all in Saint's Tomb. My every move will be a difficult one, said Jian Wushuang. Target of all? What should we do? Zhuo Bing panicked. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly. Well, it's actually not that big of a deal. My abilities are obvious and also I have a safety token. How simple do they think killing me is? However, all of you would run into plenty of trouble because of me, so you'd better leave the inner area. Leave the inner area? Zhuo Bing and the rest were all stunned. Jian Wushuang turned his wrist and took out 2 position tokens. How about this? Out of those 3 position tokens, I'll keep 1. Big sister will take 1. As for the last one, senior brother Ling Dan, senior brother Zhong Yi, and senior sister Su Tong can make the arrangements. Ling Dan, Zhong Yi, and Su Tong were slightly tempted. They were filled with an eagerness for the position token. However, they knew full well that those tokens were obtained by Jian Wushuang alone, and he had borne a huge risk for that. Junior sister Zhuo Bing already has 1. I don't need it, said Ling Dan quickly and without any hesitation. Senior brother Zhong Yi, I've gotten quite a few benefits in Saint's Tomb this time around. I think you should take the position token, said Su Tong. Zhong Yi kept quiet for a while and nodded a little. I shall take it then. Thank you, junior brother Wushuang. Jian Wushuang mildly smiled. Temporarily leave the inner area with those tokens and hide out there for some time. You can return when the fighting and killings in the inner area are over, along with the Feng Tian scroll opening up. In Saint's Tomb, the outer area was much bigger than the inner area. If they left for the outer area, genius disciples from other sects would not be able to easily snatch their tokens. After all, it would be difficult to just locate their whereabouts. Every time Saint's Tomb opened, a lot of geniuses who obtained those tokens would have chosen to hide in the outer area. Little brother, if we're going to the outer area, how about you? Aren't you coming with us? Zhuo Bing frowned. Jian Wushuang shook his head. I can't go. Besides, it's useless to go. Those sect's geniuses could still easily locate me. Why? Zhuo Bing and the rest could not understand. The outer area was a vast land. If Jian Wushuang hid there, would it not be impossible for those various sects' genius disciples to find him? However, Jian Wushuang smiled and explained, think about it. How did I manage to get all 3 position tokens at once? Jian Wushuang's words surprised them. It was only then that they remembered what they saw when Jian Wushuang obtained the 3 position tokens. The 3 tokens had appeared in the most strange and mysterious fashion. The inner area was so large and the 6 tokens were supposed to appear one by one at different corners. However, 3 of those tokens appeared in the same area. The first token at least made sense as it was being pursued by everyone and fell into Zhuo Bing's hand in the end. However, the second and third tokens appeared simultaneously right next to Jian Wushuang, which was obvious that it was given directly to him. If they were supposed to randomly appear, that coincidence did not make sense. Junior brother Wushuang. Do you mean he has something to do with it? Zhong Yi frowned hard. Although he did not mention that person's name, everyone knew he was referring to the owner of Saint's tomb, Crimson Stone Saint. Although Crimson Stone Saint had long passed, his consciousness must have remained within the tomb in bits and pieces. Everything that happened in Saint's tomb was all within his control. The strange appearance of the 3 position tokens could have only one explanation. Crimson Stone Saint did that on purpose. He deliberately gave Jian Wushuang all 3 position tokens and made him the target for all, causing everyone to try and take it from him. Why? Why did Crimson Stone Saint want to do so? Zhong Yi was puzzled. Who knows? Maybe he's only interested in me alone or wants something from me. Whichever is the case, that old fart has really locked his sights on me. Under such conditions, it doesn't matter where I go. As long as I'm still in Saint's tomb, I wouldn't be able to escape his grasp. Those geniuses could also easily find me with his hints. If that's the case, I'd rather just stay in the inner area instead of looking for a hideout and allow whatever needs to happen unfold, said Jian Wushuang calmly. Forget it then, just be extra careful, said Zhuo Bing. What she could only do at the moment was to give a word or two of advice. Otherwise, there was nothing else she could have done to help. I will, all of you go ahead. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. Zhuo Bing and Zhong Yi quickly led the many disciples from Narcissus Island and Ancient Star Temple to leave for the outer area. Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold once they were gone. He looked around the void and coldly said, Hey old fart, I don't really know what you're trying to do, but if you were trying to find out my abilities or my background using those sex geniuses, I'm afraid it's not that easy. Jian Wushuang's voice resonated outwards, but there was not a soul around. It did not seem like anyone heard his words either. However, Crimson Stone Saint could hear every word he said in the hidden isolated space. This kid's pretty smart. He knows my intention. I'll keep a close watch since that's the case. Crimson Stone Saint smiled as his consciousness was completely locked on to Jian Wushuang, watching his every move. In other parts of Saint's tomb's inner area, genius disciples from various sects were still waiting for the position token's appearance. While the frenzied fight for Jian Wushuang's 3 position tokens was occurring, only one other token appeared elsewhere and fell into the hand of Great Compassion sect's Long Zishan after an intense battle. On an open field, 10 disciples from the Great Compassion sect gathered. Their leader was the well-reputed Long Zishan. Senior brother Zishan, you're still better than the rest. You get the token as soon as you take action. Moreover, the other sects immediately stop when you get it. They dare not continue fighting you. What's with the empty words? Senior brother Zishan is ranked 3 on the 12 minor kings. Unless they want to die, how will those sect's genius disciples have the guts to fight with him? A few Great Compassion sect disciples were brown-nosing Long Zishan. Long Zishan slightly smiled over their praises and felt a little proud inside. What hilarity! Either his abilities as the 3-ranked 12 minor kings or his identity as a genius disciple from Great Compassion sect would have allowed him to do as he wished in Saint's tomb. Which disciples from regular sects dared to fight with him over the token? Right at that moment, the Great Compassion sect's top genius, Tu Qianqing, who was staying outside of Saint's tomb, sent him a direct message. Upon receiving the message, Long Zishan's smiling face immediately froze while still sitting on the ground. Junior brother Pang Tao died? Long Zishan was in disbelief. What? The Great Compassion sect disciples around him were also dumbfounded. How's that possible? How could senior brother Pang Tao get killed in Saint's tomb? Senior Brother Pang Tao had a safety token. Who was so skillful that Senior Brother Pang Tao couldn't even take out his safety token? Shouts rose one by one. The Great Compassion sect disciples were overwhelmed by surprise and even more fury. It's him, Jian Wushuang? Long Zishan squinted. The image of a weak-looking young man with only a chaotic realm cultivation level had appeared in his mind. Naturally, Long Zishan did not pay much attention to Jian Wushuang, and Pang Tao unexpectedly died in his hands. I'm to be blamed. I shouldn't have let junior brother Pang Tao go to that area. Long Zishan's face wore a sense of regret and stood up the next moment. Elder Han Yun has an order. He wants us to do everything we can to kill Jian Wushuang and avenging junior brother Pang Tao. Let's go. Let's first regroup with junior sister Aoqing before looking for Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan and the rest of the Great Compassion sect disciples immediately moved out. Meanwhile, countless different sects' genius disciples in Saint's Tomb received the news. Good God! 100 geniuses besieging Jian Wushuang alone had resulted in Jian Wushuang slaughtering more than half of them. Even Pang Tao from the Great Compassion sect died in his hand. Is Jian Wushuang's ability really that terrifying? I heard that the reason those geniuses attacked Jian Wushuang was that he took a total of 3 position tokens in one go. My goodness! We've been waiting here for so long and didn't even see 1 position token, and Jian Wushuang got 3 of them? No wonder he was attacked. After hearing the news, genius disciples from different sects were stunned by Jian Wushuang's horrifying ability and coveted over those 3 position tokens that he possessed. However, an update soon arrived. 2 of the 3 position tokens that Jian Wushuang possessed had been respectively passed to Ancient Star Temple's Ice Queen and Narcissus Island's Zhongyi. Both of them went and hid in the outer area. This news was deliberately spread by Ancient Star Temple and Narcissus Island. Their goal was to lighten Jian Wushuang's burden. As expected, the genius disciples who were drooling over Jian Wushuang's position tokens had their greed decreased a great deal after receiving the news. Such was the norm, as it was a lot less tempting when there was only 1 position token. For instance, Long Zishan of the Great Compassion sect, who also had a position token, and many knew about it too, but no one really wanted to seek trouble with him. Those various sects' genius disciples would rather wait for the last 2 position tokens' appearance than confronting Jian Wushuang, since his abilities were much more horrifying than Long Zishan's. Therefore, quite a bit of pressure on Jian Wushuang had been lifted. However, none of those sects were willing to let him off easily since he had offended them. After that news had gotten out, about 20 sects came together and posted a bounty. The subject was Jian Wushuang, of course. The reward: 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasures, and 1 divine demon nirvana elixir pill. That was only the reward for directly killing Jian Wushuang. Even if he could not be killed, by cornering him into desperation and escaping with a safety token, one would also be rewarded with 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power and 3 pinnacle ground treasures. It caused a sensation in the entire Saint's Tomb as word went out. Nobody would have thought that those sects would come together and post the bounty. Moreover, it was such a highly priced bounty. The rewards were ancient god divine power, pinnacle ground treasures, divine demon nirvana elixir. Ancient god divine power was not as exclusive as it could restore or upgrade a cultivator's divine power. One of the opportunities in Saint's Tomb, the Divine Power Ocean, was solely built with ancient god divine power. Furthermore, Divine Power Ocean was personally built by Crimson Stone Saint. It contained an infinite amount of ancient god divine power at the cosmic scale. In comparison to the entire Divine Power Ocean, 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power were next to nothing. However, that only applied to super experts who were undying saints such as Crimson Stone Saint. For regular cultivators, 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power was really not a small number. In the ancient god realm, cultivators most commonly bartered with each other using ancient god divine power. In normal circumstances, a rather wealthy first-class divine demon would own around 1,000 ancient god divine power or even less. 10,000 ancient god divine power was a lot more compared to the possession of many peak divine demons. That was an enormous wealth to many genius disciples in Saint's Tomb. Ground treasures were mystical weapons. Even the most regular ground treasures were enough to catch the eyes of third-class and second-class divine demons. Pinnacle ground treasure could even make first-class divine demons drool. However, the rewards that those sects offered were a total of 3 pinnacle ground treasures. The aforementioned was still a secondary matter, though. The most precious and rare reward was the latter Divine Demon Nirvana Elixir. Divine Demon Nirvana Elixir was a priceless treasure to any divine demon. During Jian Wushuang's past life, when the old Dragon Master's Dragon Mount was killed by Emperor Bai, he used a Divine Demon Nirvana Elixir pill as a reward to seek revenge, and had received the help of many divine demons. In order to obtain that pill, they agreed to his request without any hesitation. From that instance, one could see how important the Divine Demon Nirvana Elixir was. The elixir could help divine demons reach a breakthrough when they arrived at a certain juncture in their cultivation. For example, a second-class divine demon's breakthrough to first-class divine demon, or a first-class divine demon's breakthrough to peak divine demon. The elixir could play an important role even during a peak divine demon's breakthrough attempt to ultimate God. Therefore, many divine demons were naturally excited over it. The elixir was extremely rare and very difficult to produce. It was a strenuous affair for any Wuxia wilderness sects to even produce one. Those sects actually took out 1 divine demon nirvana elixir as a reward to kill Jian Wushuang and avenge their disciples. That was enough to show that they were going all in to make sure Jian Wushuang had no survival chance. The results were obvious. The entire saint's tomb was in a stir as soon as the word had gotten out. Countless genius disciples from various sects went crazy over the high-priced bounty. Those who lost interest in Jian Wushuang and no longer had the intention of snatching from him his position token changed their minds after catching the news. That was understandable, as the combined value of 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasures, and a divine demon nirvana elixir pill was equivalent to a position token. Once again, Jian Wushuang became the target for all the geniuses. Outside the saint's tomb, how impudent! How could they put a price on my fellow Narcissus Island disciples' head? These people are from reputable sects, yet they had the audacity to act so brazenly. Elder Wujian cursed with his voice reverberated across the glade. Second Elder, we from Narcissus Island have to do something about it, said Elder Wujian again. Elder Lingyi said in a low voice, do something? What can we do? Should we just show up at their doors and question them? Even if we do that, what if they deny all responsibilities? Elder Wujian's expression turned grave. Deny? The news has traveled far and wide. How can they not admit to it? That's not necessarily true. Although news of the reward offer has been secretly circulated among the sects, none of those sects have publicly expressed their opinions. If they refuse to admit even when we question them, we will not be able to do anything to them either, said Elder Lingyi. Bastards! Elder Wujian was furious, but he had to admit what Elder Lingyi had said was reasonable. The current situation is beyond Narcissus Island's control. These sects have suffered such big losses in Jian Wushuang's hands. We can't do much if they placed a price on his head. Wujian, the only thing you can do right now is to inform Jian Wushuang about this, so that he can be prepared, said Elder Lingyi. Elder Wujian's complexion flushed and helplessly nodded after pondering for a long time. Understood. Elder Wujian immediately acted and informed Jian Wushuang of the news. In a void inside the saint's tomb. Such a lucrative price on my head? 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasure, and even a divine demon nirvana elixir. Haha. These sects really think highly of me. Jian Wushuang indifferently smiled. He was not worried at all. Big Sister and the rest deliberately spread the news that they have 2 position tokens in their hands in order to take away some pressure from me. But with this price on my head now, it has once again pushed me into the cusp of a storm. Well, now that I don't have any more scruples, I'll have some fun with these genius disciples. Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up slightly, and there was an astonishing cold glare in his deep-set eyes. The atmosphere in the tomb turned cold. The cold wind unbridled blew. In the inner area, Jian Wushuang carried his long sword and wandered alone in the void. Many genius disciples from the various sects gathered in the small inner area. Furthermore, Jian Wushuang's wanton act made him exceptionally noticeable. That is Jian Wushuang. Yes, it's him and he's alone. They were the 8 genius disciples from the One Direction sect. Among them were 2 first-class divine demons and 6 second-class divine demons. Their eyes flashed with anger when they saw Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's head was worth 10,000 drops of ancient god divine power, 3 pinnacle ground treasure, and even a divine demon nirvana elixir. "Senior brother, shall we do it?" asked a second-class divine demon. "Nonsense. Of course we shall. If we could kill Jian Wushuang, it doesn't matter even if we don't get a seat to look at the Fengtian scroll." A first-class divine demon leading the group had a frenzied look on his face and could not hide his intent to kill Jian Wushuang. Remember, although Jian Wushuang is at peak chaotic realm, he's known to be extremely powerful. Even the great compassion sect's Pang Tao died in his hands for some reason. We have to do it, but we must not take it lightly. We have to give our all when we strike, exhorted the first-class divine demon. Yes, those second-class divine demons' disciples nodded. Go! Under the command and guidance of the 2 first-class divine demons, those 8 One Direction sect disciples sprang out from the side and attacked Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang paused and gave the 8 disciples who went right at him a sideways glance. His blood mountain sword was unsheathed behind him. Swash! Jian Wushuang's figure disappeared out of thin air. He was in front of the 8 disciples when he appeared again with 2 sword lights lit up. One of the sword lights was bright and dazzling while the other had a mysterious charm. They were both incredibly fast. They were too fast for the first-class divine demons to react. Swish! 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 It was the sounds of a blade entering their bodies. Jian Wushuang was back to the original place where he was first spotted. His expression was cold and stern as he stared at the 8 corpses who were falling downwards in the void ahead. 2 ordinary first-class divine demons and 6 second-class divine demons. How stupid of them to dream of killing me. Jian Wushuang smiled contemptuously and did not bother to take a second look at the 8 corpses before continuing his advance forward. Outside the saint's tomb, the latest news was that 8 Clear Moon Valley disciples fought against Jian Wushuang head-on, and none were spared. The 2 first-class divine demons disciples who possessed safety tokens also had no time to crush their tokens and were all killed. The news spread and caused a lot of commotion in the glade. Oh no! My condolences to the Clear Moon Valley. Jian Wushuang is indeed very powerful. He is ruthless and has no mercy. Many powerful experts from various sects were admiring Jian Wushuang's power. But shortly after the news came about, 6 Refining Fire Palace disciples and 7 Water Moon Pavilion disciples joined forces to fight Jian Wushuang. But the entire lineup was killed in merely 2 breaths of time. 22 disciples from Crimson Hand Sect, Purple Robe Division, and Everlasting Heaven Temple joined forces to kill Jian Wushuang. 21 disciples were killed on the spot, and only 1 fortunate first-class divine demon escaped by crushing his safety token. The 4 major sects, Fire Thunder Mountain, Purple Heaven Sect, Void Temple, and Dark Feather Sect joined forces but were defeated by Jian Wushuang with most of their disciples killed. The bad news kept coming one after another. The inner area was not spacious and Jian Wushuang was bound to run into those genius disciples from other sects as he roamed freely in the area. Most of those genius disciples would join forces and launch attacks at Jian Wushuang. However, the results were depressing. Those genius disciples were like lambs, waiting to be slaughtered by Jian Wushuang without mercy. 1 sect, 2 sects, 3 sects. After the news about the reward was announced, Jian Wushuang had encountered dozens of besieges and a series of onslaughts within half a day. As a result, among the dozens of sects who went into the tomb, 13 were knocked out. Most of those disciples from the remaining sects were also killed. In just less than half a day, more than 150 various sects' genius disciples died in Jian Wushuang's hands. It was outrageous. Jian Wushuang's horrifying killing spree. In less than half a day, more than 150 disciples were killed. Among those disciples, The weakest were not ordinary second-class divine demons but genius disciples from various sections. All of them were treated as treasures in their sects. Every single loss was painful for those sects, but Jian Wushuang killed them like lambs. He's crazy. Jian Wushuang is simply a killing machine. I heard he's only in his 20s this year and already has strong murderous intent at such a young age. What would he become if he's allowed to live? Kill him. He must be killed. I must kill this demon to avenge my disciples who died. Many sects experts were enraged. If Jian Wushuang had offended more than 10 or even 20 sects in merely one of his massacres, he had offended more than half of the sects in Wuxia wilderness after his half-a-day killing spree. Those sects could not wait to kill Jian Wushuang. In a corner of the plains, the 3 elders of Narcissus Island were put under more pressure as Jian Wushuang killed even more. Matters are getting out of hand and completely beyond our control, said Elder Lingi coldly. I think Jian Wushuang did nothing wrong. Those people were after his head, so he didn't need to show them any mercy, commented Elder Wujian. That's true, but we have too many sects involved now. Jian Wushuang had offended most of the sects in Wuxia wilderness. Even if Jian Wushuang could get out of the tomb in one piece, I'm afraid he will have to endure the assassination of various sections. I'm afraid that neither we nor Narcissus Island can protect him, said the 7th elder. The killings were so crazy with many genius disciples killed. Such matters had not occurred for a long time in Wuxia wilderness. There was without a doubt that Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre had aroused public outrage. Under all of the sect's extreme anger and pressure, Narcissus Island was unable to defend Jian Wushuang. Now, that young man can only look out for himself. Elder Wujian sighed. He had never expected such a situation. Initially, he thought as long as Jian Wushuang could make it out alive from the tomb, Narcissus Island would protect him under its wings. It did not seem to be the case anymore. Jian Wushuang was sauntering inside the saint's tomb. He had no idea where he was heading, so he just kept walking and killing wherever he went. His expression remained calm and unwavering. In his previous life, Jian Wushuang had seen scenes that were countless times crazier than this. He had killed innumerable people to the point he was numb. Killing merely more than 100 genius disciples did not affect him at all. The disciples are getting smarter now. Jian Wushuang scanned the area with his soul power. He could sense that many disciples gathered in the void near him, but no one acted rashly. They were just tailing him and making sure he did not disappear from their sights. Anyway, nothing could be done. Initially, those sect's genius disciples wanted to rely on their own abilities to kill Jian Wushuang and monopolize the reward, but they had finally come to their senses after half a day. It was impossible to kill Jian Wushuang with merely 1 or 2 sects joined forces. They had to join forces with more powerful experts if they were going to take Jian Wushuang out. At least 10 sects had to join forces, and perhaps about 100 or even hundreds of disciples would have to besiege Jian Wushuang in an effort to kill him. Therefore, they could only wait to round up more people. Jian Wushuang was aware of their plans but could not be bothered. As long as those disciples did not take the initiative to attack him, he would not want to start a fight. However, he would be merciless once his opponent struck the first attack. He would kill all of them if he could, regardless of which sect they belonged to or what kind of background they had. After all, he had already upset many sects. In his opinion, killing was still killing regardless of whether it was only one person or 10,000 people. Similarly, offending one sect or a few sects was anyhow still offending. If all the sects in Saint's Tomb tried to kill him in exchange for the reward, he would not hesitate to wipe all of them out. As time went by, more and more genius disciples gathered around Jian Wushuang. I'm afraid it won't be long before people from the Great Compassionate sect arrive, Jian Wushuang muttered. During the half-day massacre, he killed too fast and had not come across people of the Great Compassion sect. However, as many sects had gathered around him, news about his location would have traveled fast. The Great Compassion sect would definitely be on their way as soon as possible. Jian Wushuang's expression changed as he lifted his head to look forward. There were 5 figures standing in his way in front of him. There was only one first-class divine demon, while the other 4 were only second-class divine demon. They were probably from an ordinary sect. What took Jian Wushuang by surprise was that they neither stepped aside nor attempted to kill him like the other ordinary sect disciples when they saw him. They merely stood in front of him and had no intention to move aside and give way to him. Jian Wushuang faintly smiled and moved forward to greet the group. "Senior brother, Jian Wushuang is here." A second-class divine demon among the 5 figures nervously quipped. "I know." The first-class divine demon among those 5 nodded heavily with a hint of terror in his eyes when he looked at Jian Wushuang. Who would dare to stand in Jian Wushuang's way? "Don't worry, we aren't his opponents." This first-class divine demon strived to maintain his composure. He immediately bowed and saluted when Jian Wushuang appeared before him. "Su Nan from Ice Fire God Palace has met Senior Brother Wushuang." Ice Fire God Palace? Jian Wushuang's heart moved, and he finally understood why the 5 people in front did not avoid him. "So, you are from the Ice Fire God Palace? How's my second brother doing in your place?" Jian Wushuang smiled. The Ice Fire God Palace was a small sect in the Wuxia wilderness. Jian Wushuang knew them because his second brother, Zhuopeng, was a disciple of Ice Fire God Palace. Sunan's group breathed a sigh of relief when Jian Wushuang acknowledged their sect. Zhuopeng is now undergoing cultivation training in Ice Fire God Palace and making great progress. He has mentioned you many times. Unfortunately, he's not here in Saint's Tomb as his cultivation level is still rather low, explained Sunan. Jian Wushuang nodded slightly before waving his hand and taking out an interspatial ring. "There are many purple amulets in this interspatial ring which I've collected in the past half-day. I will now give it to you. I hope you will take care of my second brother in the Ice Fire God Palace." Su Nan took the interspatial ring. After glancing at it briefly, his face showed a pleasant surprise before he said, "Senior Brother Wushuang, don't worry. We as Zhuopeng seniors will definitely assist in his growth." "I appreciate your efforts," said Jian Wushuang before he turned and left. Su Nan and his team of 5 were stoked upon watching Jian Wushuang leave. "I know that we can get lots of benefits if we look for Senior Brother Wushuang now. Isn't that true?" Su Nan said with a smile. Jian Wushuang must have accumulated many treasures after killing so many genius disciples in this short span of less than half a day. The number of purple amulets obtained was innumerable. Those rare treasures were useful, but there were just too many purple amulets. For the sake of his second brother Zhuopeng, he did not mind giving them some purple amulets. "Senior Brother Sunan, you are smart. Is it all right if we accept Jian Wushuang's gifts in front of so many disciples?" asked a disciple of the Ice and Fire God Palace nervously. "It's Jian Wushuang who killed their disciples, not us. We'll just ignore them if they find fault with us. Let's go." Su Nan led those few Ice Fire God Palace disciples and quickly left. The other sect's genius disciples also ignored them. Jian Wushuang continued moving forward in the void, and he simply stopped when he passed a desolate hill. He sat cross-legged on the hill and closed his eyes. He stopped. The many genius disciples who followed Jian Wushuang around also stopped. "So, you aren't going to escape anymore?" "Humph. How could he escape under so many pairs of eyes? It's better to find a place to sit down, regain his strength, and prepare for the last battle." "Not necessarily. I feel that he never wanted to escape from the beginning. He's way too powerful and we may not even be able to take him down on our own. Let's wait until the Great Compassionate Sect arrives." The Great Compassionate Sect is already on their way and will be here soon. There were approximately dozens of sects which gathered around Jian Wushuang and perhaps a total of more than 200 genius disciples. Even then, those genius disciples did not act rashly. They had no confidence to do it. All of them were scared witless by Jian Wushuang's crazy massacre. Many genius disciples who were first-class divine demons had been killed. None of them wanted to be sacrificed under Jian Wushuang's sword. Therefore, without absolute certainty, they dared not act on impulse. Wait! Although those genius disciples had an insatiable hunger for the position token on Jian Wushuang and his head, they could only remain patient and wait for the Great Compassion Sect disciples' arrival. Jian Wushuang was also patiently waiting. It did not take long. More than 20 figures appeared at an astonishing speed from a distance in the void. The great compassionate sect is here. The eyes of those sect disciples who had been waiting for a long time instantly lit up. In just a brief moment, those 20 over figures appeared in front of the hill where Jian Wushuang was. They were led by a young man wearing purple armor, Long Zishan. Next to Long Zishan was a beautiful woman in a white robe who had a cold demeanor. That gorgeous woman was Yu Aoqing, another 12 minor kings belonging to the Great Compassion sect, and was ranked 8th. Yu Aoqing, as her name depicted, was an extremely cold and proud person. Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan immediately darted his razor-sharp gaze directly at Jian Wushuang, who was on the hill when he appeared. Is he Jian Wushuang? Yu Aoqing also looked at Jian Wushuang, but both her eyes and expressions were extremely cold. As for the other Great Compassion sect disciples, they were gritting their teeth with anger. The Great Compassion sect had always been arrogant and many were accustomed to their behavior. As that was the case, their disciples were used to being aloof before disciples of other sects. The other sects' disciples were usually submissive towards the Great Compassion sect disciples, but this time they suffered a big loss in Jian Wushuang's hands. Besides several core disciples who were beheaded by Jian Wushuang, even Pang Tao was killed. That did not only instigated provocation toward the Great Compassion sect but also shamed their disciples. The shame could only be thoroughly washed away if Jian Wushuang was cut 1,000 times. When many Great Compassion sect disciples arrived, Jian Wushuang, who was sitting on the hill, slowly opened his eyes. Finally here? You guys are really slow. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently, but there was a trace of mockery in his voice. Jian Wushuang, I really admire you. You have offended all the sections. Each sect's genius disciples are chasing after you. You are just like a street rat being besieged and you are still laughing. Long Zishan stared at Jian Wushuang. A street rat? This adjective is not appropriate. After all, have you ever seen a cat being wantonly slaughtered by a street rat? As for being trapped, that's not the case at all. At least, you people are not capable of doing that to me. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. Long Zishan's gazes were extremely cold. Really? Jian Wushuang? I admit that I had underestimated you before. Even junior brother Pang Tao died in your hands. But do you think you will have another chance now? Junior sister Aoqing, you and I will strike together, whispered Long Zishan. Together? Yu Aoqing was surprised. Both of them were 12 minor kings with one ranked 3rd and the other 8th. They were both aloof and haughty at heart. Yu Aoqing was reluctant to join forces with Long Zishan as their opponent was a chaotic realm younger generation disciple. Long Zishan explained as if he could read Yu Aoqing's mind. Jian Wushuang could so unscrupulously kill junior brother Pang Tao and many various sects' genius disciples. I'm 80% certain that his power is above mine. Not only you and I are going to join forces, but they will also have to launch an attack together. Long Zishan's final sentence was directed to the few Great Compassion sects' first-class divine demons. There were a total of 4 Great Compassion sect first-class divine demons apart from Long Zishan and Yu Aoqing who had just arrived. The 4 first-class divine demons nodded in unison after hearing Long Zishan's words. Yu Aoqing's eyes were locked on her target and solemnly nodded. Let's go! Following Long Zishan's low command grunt, the 6 first-class divine demons concurrently aimed their attacks at Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan took the lead as the strongest among the 6. The purple armor on Long Zishan was glowing in a faint purple light, while a dark purple spear was in his hand. A cyclone from vague purple divine powers formed under his feet as he made his move, making it seem as though he was stepping on a purple dragon. He was moving extremely fast, appearing first in front of Jian Wushuang. Go to hell! Long Zishan's eyes shone like they were filled with electricity, and the dark purple spear in his hand instantly turned into a bolt of purple lightning and whizzed towards Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan is much more powerful than Pang Tao. Jian Wushuang murmured his admiration towards Long Zishan in his heart, after judging Long Zishan's skill when he made that attack. Jian Wushuang also reacted immediately. A sword intent rose sharply. Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered sharply as he drew his sword and swept it around. His actions were smooth and coherent. Swash! Poignant sword light emerged. A very gorgeous and extremely enchanting faint purplish sword light cut through the void, just like a purple phantom gliding past. Purple blood sword technique. Purple light phantom. They were both purple, but one resembled a flash of purple lightning, while the other was a poignant purple sword light. The two instantly collided. Snap! A crisp sound rang in the void, followed by before a purple arc and sword lights filled the space. Jian Wushuang smiled indifferently as the two collided before casually swiping across his blood mountain sword and dividing its sword intent into 3 cold sword-light streaks that were directed at Long Zishan. Long Zishan was neither afraid nor perturbed. The dark purple spear in his hand shot out and pierced one after another. Clang! 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 All of Jian Wushuang's 3 sword lights were impeded. At that instant, Jian Wushuang lunged forward, and a surge of sword intent spread out like waves in a boundless ocean, instantly oppressing Long Zishan's body and the surrounding void. A series of invisible sword lights appeared out of thin air, and those sword lights engulfed Long Zishan from every direction. Such a weird sword technique. Long Zishan's expression changed. Under the coverage of those sword lights, Long Zishan had to defend himself with all his strength as he retreated. The two were exchanging moves, and it was obvious that Long Zishan was at a disadvantage. However, Long Zishan was no longer Jian Wushuang's opponent. At the same time, while Jian Wushuang was fighting Long Zishan, that cold woman, Yu Aoqing, had disappeared. The moment Jian Wushuang repelled Long Zishan, he felt chills crept up his back. Jian Wushuang was instantly alerted. Swash! A cyclone was formed out of thin air, and in the center of the cyclone, a jet-black dagger came straight out. The dagger exuded an astonishing gleam of phantom-like chilliness and went straight for Jian Wushuang's back. Yu Aoqing, the dagger's owner, had an extremely cold expression on her face. Swish! The dagger penetrated Jian Wushuang's body, but surprisingly, it did not hit any tangible matter. Instead, it made an air-cutting sound. The dagger stabbed nothing but air. Was that just a shadow? That's fast. Yu Aoqing squinted her eyes slightly before instantly located Jian Wushuang's location and creeping up beside him. Jian Wushuang casually raised his hand and wielded his sword. It was an ordinary sword movement that seemed powerless, yet it had completely held Yu Aoqing captive. Yu Aoqing was unable to evade, forcing her to discharge her divine powers to parry off that attack. Clang! There was a low and muffled impact sound. Yu Aoqing's figure was slightly shaken. The dagger in her hand collided with the sword light, resulting in its directional change. But she still managed to resist the sword attack. Swoosh! Yu Aoqing's figure backed away and pulled some distance apart from Jian Wushuang. Be careful, he is very fast. His sword techniques are also very strange and terrifying, shouted Yu Aoqing in a low voice. Long Zishan, as well as the other 4 Great Compassion Sect first-class Divine Demons disciples, had also noticed the same issues. Don't fight against him one-on-one. Use the 4-elephant formation, shouted Long Zishan. The 4 Great Compassion Sect first-class Divine Demons disciples exchanged glances and nodded. The very next moment, the 4 emanated their auras, which merged into a powerful entity under their formation. Swoosh! Those 4 first-class Divine Demons simultaneously moved. All 4 of them attacked, but Jian Wushuang felt like it was coming from only one person. Is that a formation? Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. He could not help but started to admire how incomparable the other sects in the Wuxia wilderness were to the Great Compassion Sect. He had killed so many other sects' genius disciples in the past half a day, yet he had never encountered such a formation that could fully integrate a team's combat power as one and unleashed its full potential like how those 4 first-class Divine Demons had just done. The 4 had a tacit understanding of each other and worked well together, making the formation's power greater. The formation did not add up their combat power like 1 + 1 but multiplied it by multiple folds. It was obvious that when the 4 first-class Divine Demons teamed up, they gave Jian Wushuang a much more terrifying feeling than ordinary peak Divine Demons. Long Zishan's combat power was no less than a peak Divine Demon, but the threat and pressure Long Zishan brought to Jian Wushuang were no greater than the current 4 first-class Divine Demons altogether. The 4 joined forces and didn't give me a chance to break them apart. That's quite smart. murmured Jian Wushuang while still being extremely relaxed. Kill him. One of the 4 murderous first-class divine demons waved a giant axe in his hand. Bang! A towering axe's shadow appeared out of thin air and went down full force on Jian Wushuang. This power has definitely reached the peak divine demon realm, exclaimed Jian Wushuang as his figure swayed and left a few space-time shadows behind. The axe cut through those shadows but never managed to land a hit on Jian Wushuang's physical body. Too fast. He was just too fast. We must impede his speed, otherwise our attacks will not reach him at all, said a first-class divine demon from the Great Compassion sect. Long Zishan looked at Yu Ouching. Junior sister Ouching. Let me handle him. Yu Ouching's face was cold. A gray gem that was exuding a strange aura miraculously appeared in her hand. The gray gem was filled with surging gray energies, and Yu Ouching's divine power brought those gray mist out from the gray gem. The gray mist in a speedy manner covered the area far and wide. In just a blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang was instantly engulfed in the mist. He could feel a strong force oppressing his movements. Is this the power of a domain treasure? Jian Wushuang stole a look at the gray gem before shaking his head thereafter. It's indeed a domain treasure, but a very low-level one. It's probably just an ordinary domain treasure, murmured Jian Wushuang. Domain treasures were extremely rare, both in the eternal chaotic world of his previous life and the ancient god domain of his current life. Such treasures were scarce. Although Yu Ouching was the top genius in the Wuxia wilderness, she was still only a divine demon. It was hard enough for her to come up with such a rare domain treasure, let alone bringing out some extremely precious domain treasures. I'm afraid you can't limit my speed with just a domain treasure, sneered Jian Wushuang. A single domain treasure is of course not enough, but how about adding this? Yu Ouching grunted and a stream of black current flowed from her. It soon filled the area and combined perfectly with the gray mist. The pressures on Jian Wushuang's body greatly increased the moment both of them coalesced. Oh, a domain secret technique? Jian Wushuang's expression flickered. The gray mist was released from that gray gem treasure, whereas the black current erupting from Yu Ouching's divine power was obviously a remarkable domain secret technique. The perfect combination of both had increased the domain's effect by multiple folds. Swoosh! Jian Wushuang tried moving around, but his expression turned grim after just 2 simple movements. My speed had been reduced by nearly 50%? Jian Wushuang was shocked. The reduction of his speed by half was equivalent to 1-fold. Humph, you can only blame yourself for being in a lowly realm and your insufficiently strong divine power. If you are as strong as a first-class divine demon, I might only be able to suppress 30% of your speed at most. Yu Ouching stared at Jian Wushuang and scoffed. His speed has been limited, which is equivalent to breaking his wings. He'll die for sure. Attack! Long Zishan's expression turned ferocious as his killing intent intensified. Purple lights erupted from his body while the purple cyclone got bigger under his feet. Boom! A fascinating bright purple light descended. Long Zishan appeared in front of Jian Wufang like a formidable god with his gleamingly dazzling purple light spear at hand. It's the purple thunder divine light spear. Long Zishan's spear pierced forward. Even the sky seemed to be perforated. Jian Wushuang frowned as his speed had been restricted and he could not avoid the attack with only his current speed. He could only attempt to parry it with his sword. A head-on collision happened. Boom! Jian Wushuang fell backward. Haha, that's for sure. No matter how good you are, you're just a chaotic realm. Your divine power is after all far inferior to first-class divine demons. As long as your speed is restricted, you won't be able to display your sword techniques. In that case, you are not my match at all. Long Zishan let out a hearty laugh. An excited look appeared on the faces of Yu Ouching and the 4 first-class divine demons who formed the 4-elephant formation. They lunged forward to Jian Wushuang without wasting any time. Under the extreme speed limitations, Jian Wushuang was unable to perform his strange and terrifying sword techniques. He was completely subdued by those few people from the Great Compassion sect. Boom! 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 The war began. A large number of various sects' genius disciples gathered somewhere near the battlefield as witnesses. Among the crowd was an extremely weak-looking girl in red who squatted there. Hong Luo. The girl heard a noise, turned towards the void's direction, and saw two figures rushing towards her. "Oh, Huan Chun and Huiyang. It's the two of you. What's the matter?" The girl in red had a strange expression. "Of course we have something to bring up." The young man in a white robe replied with a polite smile. That young man was called Huan Qin. Just like Huiyang and Hong Luo, he was also one of the 12 minor kings. Huiyang was ranked 10th among them. Hong Luo was ranked 5th. Huan Chun, who ranked even higher than Long Zishan, was ranked 2nd. He was the most powerful and terrifying among all of them. In Wuxia wilderness, Huan Chun had always been regarded as the ultimate expert who was second only to Tu Qianqing. Tu Qianqing had not entered the saint's tomb because he had broken through and reached the peak divine demon realm. Due to that, Huan Chun should be the strongest among the disciples in the tomb. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang had taken away his limelight. "Hong Luo, don't tell me you're just going to stay here all this time and watch the great compassionate sect disciples behead Jian Wushuang, bagging both his position token and the rewards on his head," said Huan Chun with a smile. "Well, that's my plan. Can't I do that?" Hong Luo gave an insouciant reply. "Well, you can. It's just a pity in this case, as Jian Wushuang has caused too much trouble in the tomb and offended countless sections. Those sects have put a bounty on his head which has since increased. It seems that killing him will reap much greater benefits than getting a position token," commented Huan Chun. "Huan Chen, just be frank and tell me what's on your mind. Don't go beating around the bush like this," said Hong Luo impatiently. Huan Chun was taken aback momentarily and then smiled. "Then I'll be straightforward. I've already discussed this with Huiyang. Later, when those great compassion sects people push Jian Wushuang to dead ends, we'll immediately take action before them and finish him off so that the position token in his hand and the bounty on his head would be ours. However, this is a heist against the great compassion, after all. Huiyang and I are outnumbered. That's why we're here for you. So, you want me to join forces with you?" Hong Luo's attention was piqued. "Yes, Long Zishan could only suffer in silence if both of us join forces, as there's nothing he can do to us, even if we snatch Jian Wushuang's head from the Great Compassion sect. What do you think, Hong Luo?" Huan Qin smiled. "I refuse." Hong Luo curtly shook her head. Huan Chen's and Huiyang's complexion changed. "Hong Luo, are you worried about the Great Compassion sect?" Huiyang asked quizzically. "The Great Compassion sect is rich, so they don't care about the bounty. They just want to kill Jian Wushuang, avenge Pang Tao, and save their faces. As for whether Jian Wushuang died in their hands, it doesn't really matter. We may irritate Long Zishan if we do this, but we'll never rub the Great Compassion sect wrongly." "You don't have to worry about it," said Huan Che. "I refuse to join not because I'm worried about offending the Great Compassionate sect, but I've never wanted to attack Jian Wushuang," said Hong Luo. "What?" Huan Chen and Huiyang were startled. "Well, Jian Wushuang did nothing to provoke me and none of our sect's disciples was killed. Why should I kill him? Just for the bounty? Sorry, I'm not very interested in those rewards," said Hong Luo bluntly. "If this is the case, so be it." Huan Chun and Huiyang no longer lingered around and left. Hong Luo could not help but sneer in her heart as she glanced at Huan Chen's back. What a hypocrite. He's polite to everyone on the surface but secretly is as cunning as a fox. Who knows what will happen if I were to join forces with him? Hong Luo could read Huan Chen like an open book. There were so many genius disciples in the saint's tomb that Hong Luo was spoiled with choices. Even if she was to join forces with someone, she would have never considered Huan Chen. Of course, Huan Chen's behavior was not the only reason Hong Luo refused. But the most important point was she never wanted to kill Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang is simply a super monster. I'm afraid that's unprecedented in the Wuxia wilderness. Although he has become a target for many and seems to be cornered, yet judging from his expressions and demeanors, he's not panicking or nervous in the slightest. Instead, he is still wearing a confident appearance. Hong Luo squinted slightly, not wanting to miss a single expression on Jian Wushuang's face. He could maintain such calmness and confidence even in such a crisis. He must be either an idiot who does not know the complexity of the world or still has a stronger trump card in his hand. It would be good if he died here. However, if he is to survive after this disaster, there will no longer be any sects in Wuxia wilderness that can threaten him. Instead, those sects will be shivering because they have got on his wrong side in Saint's tomb. I better stay away from such a monster. Hong Luo was extremely good at reading people, or rather very intuitive. Her instinct told her that she must not rub Jian Wushuang on the wrong side. The war continued on the battlefield. Those great compassion sect's 6 disciples, Long Zishan, who ranked 3rd among the 12 minor kings, was considered one of the top peak divine demons. His divine powers were extremely pure and his spear skills were remarkable. Jian Wushuang was completely not his match if they were to fight head-on. On the one hand, Yu Aoqing was controlling 2 domains to completely limit Jian Wushuang's speed, while at the same time, she was playing her skills and speed to their best. Her body was moving like a phantom, repeatedly appearing behind or beside Jian Wushuang when he was fighting against Long Zishan. Her dagger stabbed out over and over again. It could have easily caused Jian Wushuang a fatal injury if he was not careful. Lastly, there were the great compassion sect's other 4 first-class divine demons. Initially, those 4 first-class divine demons were Jian Wushuang's easiest opponents to deal with, as he could rely on his speed to break their attacks previously. However, as the 4 disciples formed the 4-elephant formation, which was capable of both attack and defense, they had become extremely powerful, putting a large amount of pressure on Jian Wushuang. Under the 6th siege, Jian Wushuang gradually lost support and his defeat seemed to be a foregone conclusion. Jian Wushuang, I thought your strength was amazing before, but it seems that it's nothing great now. As long as we restrict your speed, you'll not be able to fully display your strength and sword techniques. I see that you have a merely average peak divine demon realm combat strength. I'm afraid there was only an element of luck when you killed senior brother Pang Tao earlier. You will die today without a doubt. Long Zishan's sarcastic voice echoing within the space as his attacks towards Jian Wushuang with his spear was getting more swift and abhorrent. Jian Wushuang was wielding his sword with one hand and with his somewhat solemn complexion. Under the suppression of 2 domains, his speed was hampered such that even his strength was greatly reduced. It was tough for him to face 6 opponents at the same time. Young man, what are you going to do next? In that hidden independent space, the Crimson Stone Saint was observing his battle. He did not think that Jian Wushuang had been driven to a desperate situation. He could see that Jian Wushuang's composure remained calm since the beginning, without a trace of irritation. Now, show me what you've got. The Crimson Stone Saint was anticipating. Jian Wushuang sighed helplessly on the battlefield. Old man, looks like you're getting what you want, murmured Jian Wushuang. Of course, he was addressing the Crimson Stone Saint. He knew all along what Crimson Stone Saint's objective was, and being placed in such a situation, he had no choice but to show his cards. Otherwise, not mentioning the many sect's disciples still hovering around and ready to take action against him at any time, even his fight against the great compassion sect's 6 disciples before him was proving to be difficult. Oh well, look closely since you want to see my cards. I wonder if you have the vision of Mu Xiaoxiao, sneered Jian Wushuang. At that instant, boom! The stellar strength within Jian Wushuang's body exploded. The stellar secret technique was awakened. The stellar strength had long been integrated into his body's divine powers and even his blood. Now that he had released its strength, his divine powers instantly began to change. Everyone was keeping an eye on Jian Wushuang in the middle of the battlefield. Huan Chun and Huiyang were ready to take action. Jian Wushuang's aura was getting thicker at an astonishing speed under everyone's gaze. Previously, he was only at the peak chaotic realm or perhaps half-step divine demon realm. However, his aura was getting more and more powerful with the rapid changes he was undergoing. He had soon broken through and achieved 3rd-class divine demon realm. His strength and power soared instantly. Did his divine power energy just become more powerful? Everyone around noticed the changes in Jian Wushuang's energy. His cultivation level seemed to have increased. He probably performed a certain secret technique. Be extra careful. Long Zishan frowned before immediately looking towards those around him. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang had already raised his head once again. A horrifying divine power had violently emerged with a rumble as he raised his head. The two layers of the domain that were pressing against him, the gray mist field and the black energy flow that covered the sky, were immediately affected by the divine power he was projecting, which greatly decreased its oppressive effects. No! Yu Aoqing was shocked. She had already sensed that the effects of her two domains on Jian Wushuang had been reduced quite a bit. Previously, she could at least suppress half of Jian Wushuang's speed, but at this moment she could not even suppress 20% of it. Jian Wushuang moved once again and exploded with much faster and more terrifying speeds than before. Careful, junior sister, Long Zikan warned quietly. Yu Aoqing immediately reacted and steadily gazed over. Jian Wushuang's figure had appeared before her with his long sword already swung out. A blurry sword essence swept outwards. The time and space around were immediately frozen as ripples formed within the void. Space-time sword technique. First form. Cutting snow. His sword technique changed? Yu Aoqing's pupils shrunk slightly. Jian Wushuang had been using purple blood sword technique all the while when battling against them before. He pushed his speed to the limits with that absolutely strange technique. However, Jian Wushuang was using his own creation at this moment, the space-time sword technique. The sword technique he created was naturally his best and strongest sword skill. Ring. A sword shadow charged towards Yu Aoqing, and it was impossible for her to dodge it. However, in the end, she was still one of the 12 minor kings. Her black dagger had been pushed out in an instant such that even the void formed into a swirl as a result from that stab. Clang. The sound of metals clashing was heard as a trace of fear flashed across Yu Aoqing's face. The dagger she was holding flew out of her hand as her figure instantly propelled backward. Fortunately, it was not life-threatening. At the same time, Long Zishan had already appeared on Jian Wushuang's side. Eat this, kid! Long Zishan's entire body was glowing bright with purple lights with traces of purple-colored electric bolts sparking out of his eyes. The long purple spear in his hand had turned into a huge purple lightning beam as it swept up with crackles and infinite power. Shura's god-eliminating spear. Long Zishan shouted violently as the crackling lightning beam shot straight at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang steadied his eyes and sent Blood Mountain sword flatly outwards. His stab directly went to the middle of the purple lightning beam as a unique samsara strength swept outwards. Ring, ring. The crackling purple lightning in the lightning beam had turned into purple-colored divine powers and dispersed towards every direction. What? Long Zishan was absolutely shocked. He did not expect that his most powerful strike was so easily dissolved by Jian Wushuang. At that instant, Jian Wushuang attacked with his sword again. Ring. A blurry sword light lit up and directly slashing at Long Zishan. The sword light was so incredibly fast that it was almost impossible to react to it. However, Long Zishan reacted very quickly by retracting his spear to block the attack in front of his face. Just as the sword light most touched his long spear, something's not right. Long Zishan's heart skipped a beat as the purple battle armor he was wearing immediately projected a blinding golden lightning bolt, and once again formed a purple lightning armor on the surface of his purple battle armor. There was no feeling of two weapons clashing just as his spear made contact with the blurry sword shadow. Instead, a beam of mysterious sword light had slashed on the layer of purple lightning armor. Samsara sword technique. Samsara empty strike. Empty yet solid. Illusionary yet real. As he took a frontal hit from Jian Wushuang, the purple lightning armor on the surface of Long Zishan's body immediately dimmed. At the same time, a mouthful of blood shot out from Long Zishan's oral cavity as his body flew out like a broken kite. In the blink of an eye, Jian Wushuang had warded off two experts, Yu Aoqing and Long Zishan. The four-elephant formation formed by those four great compassion sects first-class divine demon were the only ones left standing around Jian Wushuang like dumbfounded. Jian Wushuang's eyes seemed at a loss when he looked at those four. Although his eyes looked lost, the Blood Mountain sword in his hand was slowly raised. He swung his sword again. It was such a plain strike without sword lights or sword shadows bursting out of it, and also without any vibrations around. The world remained extremely calm and quiet. However, an extremely fast sword shadow suddenly slashed open the void under the silence. Ring! A blinding sword light appeared out of nowhere. The sword light seemed to connect heaven and earth together. It was absolutely stunning and extremely bright. The moment when it appeared, it became the core and the focus of the world. It had even become eternal. There were many genius disciples from different sects around the battlefield, and all of them were mesmerized by the sword light. That strike was so beautiful. 9 seas and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth align. Jian Wushuang mumbled to himself. That stroke had connected time and space, yin and yang, life and death, all on a single point. Its name was Heaven and Earth Aligns. That stroke was something Jian Wushuang discovered when he was in the middle of his massacre at Saint's tomb. That stroke had included Jian Wushuang's understanding of the space-time law, and was actually the second form of his space-time sword technique as well. Jian Wushuang had just created that form, and this was the very first time it had been displayed. Everyone around was immersed in the sword light's absolute beauty. However, the 4 great compassion sects first-class divine demon in the middle of that sword light had their living souls frightened out of their bodies. The sword light slashed everything opened from the moment it appeared, breaking the connections between 4 of them. Their 4-elephant formation was completely shattered. However, the sword light's full potential was not fully unleashed. Quickly, break the safety token. As one of the first-class divine demons spoke, the sword light had swept across their bodies before he could finish his sentence. Ring! The sword light had finally dissolved. Many disciples around the battlefield had finally snapped out of it. When they looked over again, they realized in the void where the sword light was at previously, those 4 great compassion sect first-class divine demon disciples had turned into badly decapitated corpses that were slowly falling downwards. The air had frozen at that moment. That, Huan Chen and Hao Yang were standing side by side on the edge of the battlefield, feeling incredibly stunned. They were planning to go forward and kill Jian Wushuang. However, who knew Jian Wushuang suddenly burst into action. Merely in the blink of an eye, Yu Aoqing was flown off after taking a frontal hit. Long Zishan suffered severe injury. The 4 great compassion sects first-class divine demon disciples were eliminated directly. The table was completely turned. The great compassion sects Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing, and 4 first-class divine demon disciples who formed the 4-elephant formation were defeated while working together. Not only that, it was a devastating defeat. Long Zishan is badly injured. The 4 first-class divine demon disciples didn't even get the chance to break their safety tokens before they got cut down. The duration was too fast. Long Zishan and his group definitely had the upper hand a while ago, but the tables completely turned in only an instant. This Jian Wushuang is really scary. In the void surrounding the battlefield, there was already an emotional stir. The various sects' genius disciples were all stunned beyond words. Huiyang, let's do it. Huan Qin gave a soft cry. Now? Huiyang frowned. Their initial plan was to let Long Zishan and his group push Jian Wushuang to a corner and take advantage of the situation after that. However, Jian Wushuang's ability is beyond our imagination. We can't only rely on the great compassion sect disciples. We shouldn't wait anymore and must immediately take action. Only by working with Long Zishan and this lot could we have some hope to kill Jian Wushuang. Don't think too much. Let's do it. Huan Chen's voice was frosty. All right. Huiyang stopped hesitating. The 212's minor king experts immediately moved. Many genius disciples from different sects besides them had similar plans like Huan Chen and Huiyang. However, the abilities Jian Wushuang unleashed were completely out of their expectations. They had no choice but to take action earlier than planned. Charge! We'll do it together. Only then can we possibly kill Jian Wushuang. Let's first kill Jian Wushuang. As for his head and the position token on him, that would depend on our individual skills. At that instant, dozens of individuals moved almost at the same time. All of those taking action were top geniuses from various sects, and every one of them was a first-class divine demon without a doubt. That was to be expected, as ever since the intense battle started, all of them could see Jian Wushuang's abilities. Against such a terrifying opponent, it would mean instant death if those second-class divine demon participated. Only first-class divine demons were qualified to make a move on Jian Wushuang and pose some threats toward him. Therefore, those who took action at that moment were 50 first-class divine demons. It was safe to say that more than half of the first-class divine demons who entered Saint's tomb partake in the attack. Their target was Jian Wushuang. In addition, even though they came from different sects, they had a tacit understanding to first kill Jian Wushuang together before fighting for the position token in his possession as well as his head to be exchanged for those rewards. The tacit understanding came out of necessity since the abilities Jian Wushuang had shown were truly terrifying. Jian Wushuang continuously projected his soul power as he stood in the middle of the battlefield and immediately noticed when those 50 experts moved at the same time. Jian Wushuang raised his head. His eyes filled with a coldness like never before. Finally can't hold back? All of you want my head in exchange for the rewards. If that's the case, bring it on. I'll have a hearty fight with each of you today until the heavens change its color. His cold voice was like the deep growl of death which lingered for a very long time as it resonated across the entire battlefield, Saint's tomb, and space between heaven and earth. Jian Wushuang's divine power surged like a great wave as his voice died down. The divine power swiftly concentrated and very soon formed a gigantic golden divine god hologram. One of the 5 most powerful secret techniques of the 7 Stars Black Sect, Divine God of Punishment. With Jian Wushuang's cultivation level upgrade and radically strengthened divine powers, the formed divine god hologram was no longer just 300 meters like before, but reached 1,600 meters. The 1,600 meters divine god hologram was definitely much stronger than the previous 300 meters, despite it still being within the divine god of punishment first stage. Jian Wushuang immediately gave out a furious growl as the 1,600-meter tall golden divine god hologram appeared. Sweeping out like rolling waves was a stern growl. In the void surrounding him, the gray mist and black energy flow domains were still suppressing Jian Wushuang. However, after that growl, the gray mist completely retreated while the dark energy flow utterly vanished. Both domain layers that previously were oppressing Jian Wushuang disappeared into nothingness. Jian Wushuang's abilities had already reached the highest peak possible at that time. There's still more to this guy? Yu Aoqing was utterly shocked and terrified upon seeing both her imposed domains had perished. As for those geniuses who were frenziedly charging towards Jian Wushuang, they could not care any less, despite seeing the golden divine god hologram and noticing the transformation of his abilities. At the end of the day, there were 50 first-class divine demons attacking at the same time. Each of them was geniuses with extremely solid battle strength. They even had a few 12 minor kings among them and many other individuals whose abilities were close to the 12 minor kings. Nobody could withstand the power of that many people who joined the siege unless a real god appeared. Hence, Jian Wushuang should not be able to do so either. Kill! Kill him! Cold voices shouted one by one as those geniuses' killing intent was surging like a tall wave. Kill! Jian Wushuang's eyes also had a trace of redness with his killing intent also sweeping out of his body, like a Shura who emerged from hell. His figure was violently moving fast towards those geniuses around him. He wanted to accept their attacks head-on. Die! Huan Chen and Huiyang were charging on the forefront, becoming one of the earliest who crossed hands with Jian Wushuang. Huan Chen held a crimson-colored sickle in his hand as his bewitching eyes gazed at Jian Wushuang with a strange light. Ring, the formless soul attack, had penetrated Jian Wushuang's mind. Unfortunately, Jian Wushuang was a perfect chaotic creature and a reincarnated soul. Although his soul cultivation level was slightly lower, he was still an incredibly strong individual. In addition to his soul was protected by the exquisite pagoda, Huan Chen's soul attack had no effect whatsoever on Jian Wushuang. Huan Chen was left with no choice but to lash out his crimson sickle. A red flash appeared and disappeared within a split second. As for Huiyang, he brought with him a wave of fire. His punch exploded outwards with powers similar to the sudden eruption of a volcano that has been dormant for hundreds of millions of years. The entire place was covered in a burning heat. Jian Wushuang's eyes were still frosty. The Blood Mountain sword in his grip was trembling violently at that moment, as if resonating with the surging killing intent in his mind. With a swing, the Blood Mountain sword slashed without any flashy movement. That stroke was accompanied by an extremely horrifying power and surging sword essence. It was as if the world could be chopped into two halves with that stroke. The sword light swept sideways with an uprooting force along the way. The crimson-colored light, which was charging forward, immediately flew backward with every trace of its volcanic energy was gone, as if being thrown into the ocean. The joint attack of Huan Chen and Huiyang had been reduced into a totally embarrassing state with only one slash from Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang's abilities had another huge upgrade again? Huan Chen was shocked. Humph, so what? He still has to die. Huiyang's eyes were icy cold. The remaining first-class divine demons around them did not soften their killing intent at all. Suddenly, boom, 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 boom. A barrage of attacks was unleashed toward Jian Wushuang from every direction. Each of those extremely overpowering attacks was issued by first-class divine demons, and there were about 50 of them. Even though there was no formation involved, the energy of those attacks could still be described as horrifying despite not being completely focused. At least none of them was able to assert their survival after facing such a counterattack. The only thing they could do was taking out and breaking their safety token to escape. As for Jian Wushuang, he indeed had a safety token in his grasp. However, he would not break the safety token. As a matter of fact, not only would he not do so, but he also could not. He had bred enmity with too many sects during his trip into Saint's Tomb and had caused an uproar. In such circumstances, the world outside may not be safer than the interiors of Saint's Tomb itself. After all, Jian Wushuang had no idea if Narcissus Island could completely defend him. Even if they wanted to, could they do so? On the other hand, Jian Wushuang never liked to rely on others. Hence, he could only rely on himself. At this time, his only chance was to stay in Saint's Tomb, obtain the opportunities he was supposed to get, and use it to upgrade his abilities. Only by doing so could he perhaps be qualified to face those various sections. Hence, he would absolutely never use the safety token. Piercing noises sliced through the air and swept towards him. Jian Wushuang could feel the terrifying energies that came from each attack around him. His eyes were filled with a sense of craze. That's right. Bring it on. With a big shout, the divine hologram behind Jian Wushuang was also letting out an earth-shattering roar. Infinite sword essences shot upwards as Jian Wushuang's divine power ruthlessly swept outwards. In the center of the battlefield, Jian Wushuang had completely unleashed his powers. He issued continuous attacks with his sword, slicing, sweeping, or turning it into a wide-casting sword net, sweeping across the battlefield. With the help of space-time law, his figure burst into a terrifying speed, flashed non-stop, and left behind multiple space-time holograms at different parts of the void. Facing the attacks from multiple directions, Jian Wushuang would avoid it if he could and block with his sword if he could not. Otherwise, he would resist it with his own body. Like a possessed person, he rushed towards any random direction at will in the center of the battlefield. After a wave of attacks, Jian Wushuang was still standing upright. Moreover, his figure had penetrated the crowd. Kill! Jian Wushuang raised his sword as he shouted with his cold voice. The heaven-shaking sword shadow swept out in a dreamlike manner. Let's resist together. There were a total of 10 first-class divine demons standing together before Jian Wushuang and resisting his attack. With a huge bang, each of those 10 divine demons flew backward at the same time under the impact of his sword light. A concentrated attack was launched once again behind Jian Wushuang following a deep rumble. Scram! Jian Wushuang's growl was like rolling thunder as his sword swung out with momentum. A sword shadow infinitely expanded to the point of covering both sky and sun. The attacks launched by those 8 first-class divine demons behind Jian Wushuang was completely shattered with his single sword strike. Their facial expressions radically changed upon seeing the pseudo-divine demon Jian Wushuang charging at them. They could do nothing but unhesitatingly retreat. However, in the midst of retreating, a powerful soul power penetrated Jian Wushuang's awareness. causing the exquisite pagoda in his awareness to violently shake before calming down after a short moment. Jian Wushuang's body paused slightly and looked over at the void next to him with a frown. It's blocked. Is this guy's sole defensive abilities that powerful as well? Huan Chen's face showed disbelief. Soul attacks were his forte and the move he just unleashed was his most powerful one. Unfortunately, it still did close to nothing toward Jian Wushuang. Whoosh! Jian Wushuang's speed had reached the very limits as he recklessly charged toward different spots on the battlefield and crushed everyone present by relying on his sword techniques and his abilities. He unleashed his abilities to the max. Even though there were close to 50 very powerful first-class divine demon genius disciples who were besieging Jian Wushuang, they could not find a way to coordinate with each other since all of them came from different sections. What they had done was merely sieging and attacking. As soon as Jian Wushuang endured their first wave of attacks and infiltrated the crowd, it was very difficult for them to concurrently attack Jian Wushuang again. It was usually a group of around 10 to 20 or more first-class divine demons attacking Jian Wushuang, but he could directly withstand those frontal attacks. On the contrary, Jian Wushuang's sword attacks remained just as terrifying, and every stroke he released required at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon disciples to resist against it. Individually, none of them would have the guts to fight against Jian Wushuang's sword. The battle heated up. The fight was absolutely insane. Terrifying rumbles filled the void. However, the obviously numerical unbalanced great battle actually went on for 7 minutes without a clear result. Jian Wushuang remained in his peak state as he rushed here and there on the battlefield while those geniuses around were giving their all to attack. However, those attacks did not provide any substantial effects. This guy, Long Zishan, who was heavily injured by Jian Wushuang before, had swallowed an elixir pill and restored quite a bit of his battle strength. He also went back to the battlefield to join the siege. However, what he had not expected was that even with so many first-class divine demon disciples joining forces in the siege, they were unable to kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. The abilities that Jian Wushuang unleashed were unfathomably powerful. It was not only his abilities but also his stamina. Yes, it was stamina. Such stamina reminded Long Zishan of someone. Senior brother Qianqing. When senior brother Qianqing was a first-class divine demon, he was exactly as courageous and fearless when facing a peak divine demon. He dared to accept a frontal attack, even resisting head-on. In the end, senior brother Qianqing cut down the peak divine demon. Long Zishan's body was trembling. To Qianqing. He was a legend among the young generation of Wuxia wilderness, as well as the idol of countless great compassion sect disciples and Long Zishan. Although Long Zishan was also a true genius and placed third in the 12 minor kings, he knew full well of the distance between him and Tu Qianqing. It was a type of distance that he could never catch up on. Long Zishan had absolutely no courage to compare himself to him when he stood before Tu Qianqing. However, he currently had the same feeling as facing Tu Qianqing when confronting Jian Wushuang. No, he's actually scarier than senior brother Qianqing. Long Zishan stammered. Truthfully, Tu Qianqing was skillful, but however great he was, it was impossible for him to face close to 50 first-class divine demons in that manner when he was only in the chaotic realm. Forget about the chaotic realm. Even if Tu Qianqing was a first-class divine demon like the rest, he would have chosen to escape at the first given moment upon receiving attacks from so many genius disciples. He would never have the stamina to stay back and start a huge battle against them. However, Jian Wushuang dared to do it. Not only that, he actually succeeded. Almost 50 first-class divine demon genius disciples joined hands together, but could not kill Jian Wushuang in a short time. Not to mention that a lot of those first-class divine demons were already being overpowered by Jian Wushuang's abilities and stamina while fighting him. They also became fearful of him. At this rate, how could we even think of avenging junior brother Pang Tao? Long Zishan was very anxious. However, at that moment, a frostily beautiful woman was standing in a corner of the battlefield. She was Yu Aoqing. She did not join in the siege and attack Jian Wushuang. She was only quietly standing there and staring deadly at Jian Wushuang. Everything in the surroundings, including those people and the battle, had vanished for her. Even her own presence was as good as vanished. There was one person left in her entire world, which was Jian Wushuang. In her mind, she was recalling her master's teachings. Her master was one of the highest-ranking elders in the Great Compassion sect who used to be a killer, an assassin. He was such a great killer that he would be called the Emperor in the Dark. As long as he made a move, he would ensure his opponent dies. That master of hers taught her how to become a truly qualified assassin and also told her about the special state an assassin should achieve. That state was the state of self-oblivious. Forget about oneself. Forget about the world. Forget about everything. Remember only the target and the mission. Although her master had achieved that profound state and demonstrated it to her before, Yu Aoqing never fully grasped it. However, at that very moment, she had her full attention staring at Jian Wushuang, who was on the battlefield, watching his every move and even facial expression. Finally, she understood something. Forget about myself. Forget about emotions. Yu Aoqing murmured to herself, and her figure disappeared in a flash from the battlefield in the next moment. She had completely blended into the air, becoming part of the space, time, heavens, and earth. Nobody could realize her existence when she was in such a special state. She gradually moved closer to Jian Wushuang and very soon arrived somewhere near him. Jian Wushuang was still unleashing his sword techniques and fighting frenziedly with those first-class divine demons. Their battle intent was shaking the heavens. Buzz off! With a furious shout, Jian Wushuang lashed out his sword sideways and struck 4 first-class divine demons before him with the back of his blade. Although those 4 first-class divine demons tried blocking with their full might, the overpowering sword pressure still hit them hard as they fell towards the ground. Yu Aoqing made her move at that moment. Nobody had realized that, including Jian Wushuang. Yu Aoqing appeared behind Jian Wushuang and suddenly thrust her pitch-black dagger towards Jian Wushuang's heart. Self-oblivious state. Exterminate with one strike. Yu Aoqing's eyes showed a terrifying glint of coldness. It was a crouching assassin who finally found the perfect time to strike and unleashed her ultimate strike of death. That one strike was enough to cause fear on any divine demon. It was too sudden. Yu Aoqing's appearance was just too sudden. Nobody noticed she was there previously. Only when Yu Aoqing appeared and thrust a dagger out that people were suddenly aware. It's Yu Aoqing. When did she get there? That strike was perfect. What a perfect strike. Nobody would be able to block that strike. The first-class divine demons on the battlefield were all awestruck. Some even had fear written on their faces. All of them could recognize just how terrifying Yu Aoqing's strike was. Her movement was so clean and perfect without any sense of redundancy when she attacked. That strike was sure to kill. Yu Aoqing's attack at that time was really a pleasant surprise. It was just too perfect. Junior sister. Even Long Zishan was shocked by Yu Aoqing's movement. He believes if that sudden strike was to be directed at him, he might not even have a survival chance. Following right after that shock was a feeling of ecstasy. He could tell that Jian Wushuang did not notice Yu Aoqing's sudden appearance as well. It was impossible for him to dodge Yu Aoqing's perfect strike. Jian Wushuang was indeed incredibly surprised. The perfect killing strike from Yu Aoqing was also out of his expectations, and he did not have time to react to it. He could neither avoid the attack by relying on his movement speed nor using his sword technique. He could only allow the dark dagger to stab his heart. However, he barely panicked. Ring. The extremely cold black dagger, which brought an infinite amount of killing intent, was closing in on Jian Wushuang's body. The dagger finally tore through Jian Wushuang's attire and penetrated his skin. Thud. When the soft sounds of the blade entering his body were heard, Yu Aoqing felt somewhat excited. Master, I've finally done it. I've finally achieved what you described as the state of self-oblivious. Yu Aoqing mumbled. The many first-class divine demons who were attacking Jian Wushuang were ecstatic when they saw that. However, suddenly, clang. A metal clashing noise was heard, and all those genius disciples' ecstatic smiles froze one by one. Yu Aoqing surprisingly felt some resistance on the tip of her dagger and was shocked the next moment. The tip of her dagger had indeed penetrated Jian Wushuang's skin and went into his flesh. However, it only pushed slightly into it and did not reach Jian Wushuang's heart. It stopped at the rib bone in front of his heart. An explosive power had been projected when the dagger's tip touched his rib bone, but it did not shatter it. Instead, that bone had blocked the dagger. B-bone. Yuao was completely shocked. My stroke couldn't shatter his rib bone? How is that possible? The genius disciples around were also dumbfounded. Long Zishan was also awestruck. They could not believe their eyes. One must understand that, although a cultivator could practice body tempering methods and have a strong divine body, it was only an external feature and would not help with internal resistance. Yuao deadly perfect strike clearly penetrated Jian Wushuang's divine body's surface defenses and went into his flesh. Normally, that should have guaranteed his death. However, the ultimate death strike was blocked flat out by Jian Wushuang's rib bone in the end. How hard was his bone? How's that even possible? Yuao mind was filled with disbelief. What she did not know was that the world was filled with wonders. It may be unbelievable to some people, but for Jian Wushuang, the primordial void celestial body that he practiced was a top-tier body cultivating secret technique in ancient god domain. The secret technique not only upgraded the surface area of his divine body but also included the entire body structure, muscles, divine powers, down to every cell in his body. Each of them would have had a huge improvement. He had succeeded in learning the second volume of the primordial void celestial body. Adding to the fact that he was a perfect chaotic creature where every part of his body was perfect, therefore his bones were incomparable to a regular cultivator's. The bones in his body were definitely not weaker than those under a layer of strong body defense. As long as his bones were not shattered, it would not bring him any fatal harm. Yuao perfect ultimate death stroke did indeed pose some threat towards Jian Wushuang, but she was still far from being able to kill him. I just don't believe it. Yuao gritted her teeth. Her arrogant self could not accept what just happened before her at all. With her divine powers gushing out of the black dagger and leading it, she immediately swept outwards. The other side of Jian Wushuang's chest had exploded into a bloody cave. It was only a bloody cave. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang slightly turned his head around. Boom! Infinite killing intent swept upon Jian Wushuang like a collapsing mountain and tsunami. Yuao figure was trembling for a while and her mind had a bang. Junior sister, retreat now! Long Zishan shouted explosively not far away. He saw that Jian Wushuang had already unsheathed his sword. Sword lights were swept by as a gigantic sword net completely covered Yuao. Yuao suddenly sensed a critical danger like never before filling her mind. She did not dare to hesitate, took out her safety token at the first possible moment, and pinched it into pieces. Ring! Some lights flashed and Yuao figure vanished right before Jian Wushuang's eyes. Jian Wushuang had formed the sword net in vain. She escaped pretty fast, spoke Jian Wushuang with his incredibly cold eyes. The bloody cave on the other side of his chest was rejuvenating at a speed noticeable by the bare eyes. Only within the blink of an eye, the blood cave had completely disappeared without leaving a mark. Jian Wushuang's aura had also not weakened at all. Many first-class divine demon disciples besieging him were almost completely dumbfounded. Such a perfect, powerful, and terrifying strike had already gone into his body, and yet it did not kill him? His body's defensive capabilities are so strong. Let's not even talk about killing him. His aura did not even weaken a bit. It obviously didn't affect him in any way. That rejuvenating capability, was that a joke? Huge freak. He is a huge freak. One could not blame how stunned they were. When a normal cultivator, even a peak divine demon, was faced with the perfect ultimate death stroke such as that, he would probably die. Even if he did not die, he would at least be severely injured, and his abilities would have drastically decreased. However, even though Yuao had injured Jian Wushuang, he was immediately rejuvenated completely. He cured his wound in a short moment without the assistance of elixirs, but only relying on his own recuperative abilities. The terrifying body defensive abilities and rejuvenating abilities made the geniuses on the scene feel like they were living in a dream. All their hearts were shaken after that occurrence, and they even began to wonder if they could ever kill Jian Wushuang. Their doubts grew bigger by the minute as the intense battles continued. Especially after another round of continuous fighting, They sensed that Jian Wushuang still remained in his top form. This caused those geniuses to completely lose their confidence. Huan Chun, did you notice? Up till now, Jian Wushuang's divine powers are still at the same level. Huiyang came next to Huan Qin. Huan Qin nodded solemnly. I saw it. After fighting for such a long period of time, we who attacked him had used up quite a bit of our divine powers, but his divine powers felt infinite while his battle strength did not decrease at all. How can a mere chaotic realm cultivator have such limitless divine powers? His speed is amazingly fast. His understanding of space-time law is incredibly high. He can form up to 6 different space-time shadows at once, and the powers of his sword techniques are frighteningly strong. One stroke from him takes at least 7 or 8 first-class divine demon to collectively resist. Otherwise, it's impossible to do so. His body's defensive abilities are even scarier. A perfect strike like that from Yu Aoqing could not kill him. Moreover, his injuries were cured in the blink of an eye with his incomparable rejuvenating abilities. His soul defensive abilities are also pretty strong, such that my soul attack couldn't pose any threat to him. And now, his divine powers also seem infinite. Huan Chen and Huiyang both looked at each other and were unable to hide the shock in their hearts. They were exclaiming in their minds. What kind of monster exactly were they fighting against? That monster was grotesquely strong in every aspect that one could not find a weak point at all. For them, he was impeccable. If he were to be described in a single word, perfect would be it. Yes, it was perfect. A monster, a huge freak, who was perfect and flawless in every way. How did such a freak come about? Huan Qin mumbled. They did not know that Jian Wushuang was the second perfect chaotic creature within the mortal world. A perfect chaotic creature was an existence with no weakness, to begin with, and was extremely perfect in every aspect. Due to the fact that Jian Wushuang was only in the chaotic realm, he still could not reach true perfection. However, as long as he broke through to divine demon realm in the future, he would be truly perfect by definition, the only one within heaven and earth. What they had just seen was actually nothing in comparison. We had exhausted every existing method. We had used whatever could be used, but we still couldn't kill him. There's just no way, said Huan Qin hopelessly. Huiyang, who was next to him, also nodded. Those first-class divine demons that were attacking Jian Wushuang also looked over. Whether or not they wanted to admit, the truth was that a total of 50 first-class divine demon who joined hands still could not kill him. Setting aside killing him with a real strike, they could not even exhaust Jian Wushuang to his death with either their combined divine power or time. There's nothing else to do but to stop. There's no other way. This Jian Wushuang is really too much of a freak. Let's forget it. It's only a waste of time to continue fighting. The first-class divine demons exclaimed lightly and one by one stopped their movements, obviously ready to give up. Those first-class divine demon disciples stopped their attacks. Although they wanted to stop, Jian Wushuang did not. Boom! Jian Wushuang's energy surged into the sky as he charged directly toward a few first-class divine demons and swung his blood mountain sword. They were startled and resisted with all their might but were immediately blasted backward. Jian Wushuang, we have stopped. What more do you want? Yelled one of the first-class divine demons. Jian Wushuang chuckled. What more do I want? You fight whenever you want and stop as you wish. There is no such thing. Don't all of you want to kill me? So, let me have an old hearty fight. You either kill me or die under my sword one by one. Jian Wushuang stuck out his tongue and licked his lips while wearing a crazed expression on his face. Madman! The first-class divine demons could not help but curse at him in their minds with their rage-filled hearts. Jian Wushuang, do you really want to fight until both of us suffer great losses? Huan Qin shouted. Jian Wushuang sarcastically said, both suffer great losses? I won't die, but none of you should expect to live. All those first-class divine demons were shocked with their rage burning even brighter. It was true that they could not kill Jian Wushuang, but he could not do much to them either. However, Jian Wushuang said they should not expect to live. Where did he get the confidence to say that? However, right at that moment, A surging wave of divine powers was unleashed from Jian Wushuang's body. The giant golden divine god hologram behind him was glowing with an even brighter golden light as well. As Jian Wushuang waved his hand, a few palm silhouettes clapped at the void. Prison of punishment. Jian Wushuang's eyes glowed, and as soon as his voice died out, a huge amount of gold-colored divine powers extended out of the divine god hologram. The golden divine powers expanded far and wide, forming a large ocean of golden divine powers. It soon filled the entire place and covered the whole battlefield in it. The golden divine power ocean very quickly concentrated and solidified, turning in a gigantic golden prison. The first-class divine demons' faces changed when they saw that gigantic golden prison which surrounded them. Domain tactic? It's not merely a domain, but a complete prison. It has completely imprisoned us. Blast it open. Some first-class divine demons immediately started taking action, hoping to break open the golden prison. However, after a few rounds of attacks, nobody could shake the golden prison a bit. Even when the attackers included Huan Chen, Long Zishan, Huiyang, and more. Jian Wushuang stood at the center of the golden prison, looking at those first-class divine demons trying to break out of it without any intention of stopping them. Prison of punishment. This is a complete and true-to-the-definition prison of punishment, murmured Jian Wushuang. Prison of punishment was a tactic within the divine god of punishment secret technique. In his eternal chaotic world's past life, he had seen Emperor Bai using it. However, the divine god of punishment that he learned was incomplete, and so was the prison of punishment that he used. When Emperor Bai used it, it only formed the golden divine power ocean which acted as a domain and tied an opponent's hand. The prison of punishment's true function was to imprison the opponent. Golden prison was the complete stage of prison of punishment. Following Jian Wushuang's upgraded cultivation level, in addition to increasing another half a stage with the help of 7-star secret skills, he could finally perform prison of punishment. Once he did it, the humongous golden prison locked every first-class divine demon inside. As for Jian Wushuang, who unleashed the prison of punishment, he had become the golden prison's master. Rumble, with a tiny tweak of his mind, the overpowering golden divine power ocean unfolded and affected every first-class divine demon in the prison. Those first-class divine demons felt a titanic mountain pressing on them. Damn! It really is a domain. A very strong domain. Under this domain, my abilities are suppressed by at least 30%. This Jian Wushuang could actually think of such a tactic? The many divine demons who were imprisoned in the golden prison were feeling uneasy. However, they only knew that their own abilities were suppressed under the effect of the golden divine power. What they did not know was the prison of punishment's domain causes one's suppression to become the other's gain. As the prison of punishment's master, Jian Wushuang's abilities were enhanced quite a bit as their abilities were being suppressed. The slaughter begins. Jian Wushuang smiled cruelly as his figure, whoosh, in a flash, with the golden divine power filling the space. The many first-class divine demons around could not clearly see Jian Wushuang's figure. All they saw was the sudden flash of a sword light. Careful! Screams of horror filled the air, but the warning clearly came too late. As the sword light dimmed, a total of 4 first-class divine demons could not even react before being instantly killed. Whoosh! Another beam of sword light appeared in another corner. There were 7 first-class divine demons at that corner who immediately reacted when they saw the sword light. They acted right away, wanting to block the beam of sword light. Ring! A gigantic sword light appeared out of nowhere. The sword light was incredibly attractive and bright, as though it could connect the sky and earth together. The moment it appeared, it became the focal center of heaven and earth. It even became an eternity. Throughout 9 oceans and 8 wilderness, heaven and earth aligned. The 7 first-class divine demons' faces still had the shocked look, although their divine bodies had already been penetrated by the sword light, forever losing signs of life. Prior to unleashing prison of punishment, even if Jian Wushuang used heaven and earth aligned with all his power, as long as 7 or 8 first-class divine demons joined forces, the attack could be resisted. However, Within the prison of punishment where one's suppression became the other's gain, a huge gap appeared between Jian Wushuang's abilities and theirs. Now, when Jian Wushuang utilized that move, even 7 first-class divine demon-joined hands could not resist it. With just one stroke, another 7 first-class divine demon perished. This scenario shocked all the surrounding first-class divine demons. Quick! Think of something to break down this golden prison. If we stay here, we would only be chased and slaughtered by Jian Wushuang. Quick! Blast the prison. The first-class divine demons attacked with everything they had. However, they underestimated the golden prison's sturdiness. Precisely speaking, they had underestimated one of 7 Stars Black Sect's strongest secret techniques. 7 Stars Black Sect was the ancient god realm #1 sect. For the divine god of punishment to be acknowledged as one of the strongest secret techniques of such a sect, it enjoyed great fame in the ancient god realm. The prison of punishment move within it was also especially famous. The execution of the divine god of punishment spelled Jian Wushuang's strength. As long as the golden prison's form was rigid and strong, those first-class divine demons could never break it unless they formed a coalition to strike an attack. Although those first-class divine demons were painstakingly bombarding the golden prison's surface, their attacks were very scattered and not concentrated at one point. They only managed to cause vibrational waves on the golden prison, which was far from collapsing the golden prison. While they were firing attacks at the golden prison, Jian Wushuang went with his full strength and continued his wild massacre. Under the prison of punishment's influence, his strength skyrocketed while his speed was much faster than before. His sword skills were even more terrifying. Those first-class divine demons whose strength had been greatly suppressed could hardly stop Jian Wushuang's terrifying sword skill. Ugh! A token appeared in Huan Chen's hand as he lightly sighed. Huan Chen, are you going? Huiyang looked over in surprise. With a hint of helplessness in his heart, Huan Chen said, "You too. Smash the safety token. Jian Wushuang's abilities have completely exceeded our understanding. In the golden prison, he's like a master. I'm afraid that only an ultimate god can take initiative to forcefully annihilate this prison and kill him. If we continue staying in this prison, we'll only be killed by him one after another. Crushing the safety token may render us losing the opportunity to be enlightened by the Fengtian scroll and visit the divine power ocean, but it is better than losing our lives." After finishing his statement, Huan Chen ignored Huiyang's reaction and instantly crushed the safety token in his hand. A burst of light flashed and Huan Chen's figure immediately disappeared from the saint's tomb. Even Huan Chen had to crush the safety token to protect his life, let alone other first-class divine demons. Huiyang hesitated momentarily before he too crushed his token. Many first-class divine demons who were trapped in the golden prison took out their safety tokens and crushed them. There were also those who did not make the hasty decision and were obviously still hoping for the best. But the result was Jian Wushuang's merciless killing. Jian Wushuang. Long Zishan's complexion flushed as he stared down hard at Jian Wushuang. Although he had a strong desire to kill Jian Wushuang, he was more shocked by the scenes laid before his eyes. He was struck with stupor from Jian Wushuang's powers and his trump cards. Jian Wushuang seemed to have endless potential. The moment had arrived when even he had to retreat by taking out his safety token and crushing it into pieces. In the vast expanse of heaven and earth, at the great battlefield, a large number of geniuses from various sects stayed in the void around the battlefield. They had their eyes fixed forward, but what appeared in their sight was a huge golden prison. The golden prison covered the entire space, completely obstructing their eyes and even their soul power. The disciples of those sects had no idea what was happening in the golden prison. At that instant, finally, the huge golden prison began to melt into thin air. The gust of golden divine powers faded, and soon the battlefield reappeared in everyone's sight. Everyone looked around, only to find that there was only one person left on the battlefield. Yes, there was only one person still standing proudly in the void. That person was Jian Wushuang. As for the nearly 50 genius disciples who had previously besieged Jian Wushuang, some turned into corpses while others had completely disappeared. Of course, those sect disciples knew fully well where they had gone. It was just that they found the result to be unacceptable. There were so many first-class divine demons including Huan Chen, Long Zishan, Yu Aoqing, and Huiyang. Several 12 minor kings join forces, yet Jian Wushuang single-handedly defeats them. A lot of people have died. I am afraid no less than 20 first-class divine demons have died in his hands, and the remaining must have escaped using the safety token. What happened in the golden prison just now? How could it turn out this way? Everyone's eyes widened. They could not believe what was happening before them. However, that was the reality. Nearly 50 first-class divine demons besieged Jian Wushuang, but they were trapped in the golden prison. When the golden prison disappeared, only Jian Wushuang was left. He was the only one in the 9 heavens and 10 domains left standing on that battlefield. No one knew exactly how Jian Wushuang did it. They only knew that nearly 50 first-class divine demons disciples who were geniuses joined forces and were wiped out by Jian Wushuang alone. Hong Luo, a red-clothed girl squatting in the void, was staring at Jian Wushuang with her eyes wide. Hong Luo felt fortunate. Fortunate that she trusted her intuition before and did not agree to Huan Chen and Huiyang's invitation to kill Jian Wushuang together. Otherwise, she would have to leave the tomb with her safety token. Jian Wushuang, who had become the focus of the battlefield, slowly raised his head. His gaze was motionless and stony with a sense of indifference, and he slowly glanced at the genius disciples around him. His uncompromising gaze swept around. As far as his eyes could see, the genius disciples were either in panic or ashamed and hung their heads low. They were panicking because of Jian Wushuang's strength. They were also ashamed because of Jian Wushuang's strength. They were genius disciples carefully cultivated by various sects, but their so-called genius title was an utter joke in front of Jian Wushuang. Silence. The entire space had fallen silent. All the disciples stood speechlessly, not daring to say a word. Jian Wushuang did not speak either, but merely waved the Blood Mountain sword in his hand. Boom! The ground under his feet cracked open, instantly creating a huge sword mark, dividing the battlefield into 2 halves. Jian Wushuang finally spoke. I am standing right here. Who else wants to take my head? Who else? Jian Wushuang yelled with his voice resounding like thunder echoing in space. How domineering and unparalleled. His fighting intent was boiling. Heaven and earth rumbled under his unrelenting voice. Countless genius disciples around were startled by the roar, with their hearts trembling in fear. Jian Wushuang was alone, holding a sword in one hand and standing on top of the world. His sword intent swept across straight into the heavens like a king of the world. He was like an invincible ruler of heaven and earth with the sword in his hand, ridiculing all sentient beings in the world. Who in the world dared to fight him? On the vast glade outside of Saint's tomb, the experts from various sects were still gathering and waiting. Jian Wushuang is dead meat for sure. Indeed, he is targeted by so many sections. He can't possibly escape. We've got news. Jian Wushuang has been besieged by many disciples and is now cornered. Long Zishan and others from the Great Compassion sect have also arrived and fought him. The news spread among those experts. They were quite relaxed after hearing the positive news. They had to admit that Jian Wushuang was indeed an amazing genius, a monster level to be frank. However, he had made a terrible mistake to arouse a hornet's nest. He only had one end waiting for him: death. In a corner, the 3 Narcissus Island elders stood together. Second elder, how's the Lord dealing with it? Elder Wujian asked anxiously. The Lord has discussed Jian Wushuang's issue with many elders, but they haven't decided on what to do yet, said Elder Lingi. Elder Wujian frowned. No decision? What's there to decide? The Lord should have personally come here. Only when he's here in person can we keep Jian Wushuang safe. Elder Lingi took a deep look at Elder Wujian and solemnly said, Wujian, this matter is not as simple as you think. Jian Wushuang has irked too many sections. Our Narcissus Island should act cautiously to avoid being a public enemy of those sections. Currently, those elders on the island are divided into 2 factions. A few people think Jian Wushuang is an exceptional genius just like you. one that has never appeared in the Wuxia wilderness with a bright and promising future. They think that Narcissus Island should keep him at all costs. But the other faction with a larger number of elders think that Narcissus Island shouldn't be enemies with so many sects, as this will bring disaster to Narcissus Island. Hence they think that Jian Wushuang should be handed over. Elder Wujian's complexion changed. What? Hand him over? Jian Wushuang is the disciple of Narcissus Island. Not only did Narcissus Island not defend him, but they are also considering handing him over. Elder Wujian thought that idea was unfathomable. Why would a sect not try their best to defend a disciple? He thought that Narcissus Island should at least give their best to help Jian Wushuang, even if they were pressured by those angry sections. How could they even think of handing Jian Wushuang over? How could a prominent sect do something so unabashed? Lingyi spoke again. Wujian, you have to figure out something first. Jian Wushuang is after all just an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. He hasn't been in Narcissus Island long, and the most important part is that he's only willing to serve as an outer disciple even though he had unparalleled talent. Why do you think he did that? He obviously enjoys freedom. If I must be honest, and to put it bluntly, he had no sense of belonging towards Narcissus Island. Why should we, Narcissus Island, risk offending all these sects to defend a disciple like him? Elder Lingyi is right. Although I must admit that Jian Wushuang is incredibly talented, we must also consider the feelings of other sects and hand Jian Wushuang over to them. This may sound somewhat inhuman, but it's the appropriate thing to do. The seventh elder nodded as he expressed his opinion. You too? Elder Wujian could not believe his ears. He could see that both Elder Lingyi and the seventh elder agreed to hand Jian Wushuang over. If both of them had that idea, it was not hard to imagine what the majority of the elders in Narcissus Island would think. Of course, we are entitled to our own opinions, but the final decision lies in the hand of the Lord. So let's just wait and see, said Elder Lingyi. Elder Wujian scoffed. Wait and see? Now that the battle has broken out in the tomb, all the genius disciples are besieging Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang will definitely not be able to handle it himself. I'm 80% sure that he would be crushing his safety token to escape. However, after he came out of the tomb, the experts here would never let him go. If Narcissus Island doesn't step in to protect him, wouldn't he be dead for sure? Elder Lingyi bluntly rebuked. Well, he asked for it. If he had chosen to be a core disciple of Narcissus Island in the first place and showed a sense of belonging towards Narcissus Island, we would do our best to protect him. Too bad he had chosen to be an outer disciple. Elder Wujian was furious, but he had no choice except to continue waiting. The experts from all the other sects were also waiting patiently in the glade. They were waiting for Jian Wushuang's beheading news or Jian Wushuang to crush his safety token and appear in the glade. Either way, Jian Wushuang would be dead. Their wait did not last long. A burst of light lit up suddenly. Is he here? Is it Jian Wushuang? Instantly, all eyes were on the light. The light diminished and a figure slowly emerged in front of everyone. However, the experts present had a strange color to their faces when they saw who that was. The figure that appeared was a cold and haughty woman, the top genius of the Great Compassion sect and one of the 12 minor kings, Yu Aoqing. Instead of Jian Wushuang, Yu Aoqing was the first to appear. Aoqing, what's going on? Sister Aoqing, why would you crush the safety token? Several experts from the Great Compassion sect immediately stepped forward and asked. They were flabbergasted. Yu Aoqing's eyes were still a little hollow. She was still in a daze thinking about the scenes of her fight against Jian Wushuang in the tomb, especially the scene where she found it extremely unbelievable. She was in the state of self-oblivious and delivered her strongest stab ever under such perfect timing. The dagger had also penetrated Jian Wushuang's body, yet Jian Wushuang's ribs managed to ward it off. Junior sister Aoqing, Tu Chencheng cried out again. Yu Aoqing came back to her senses and realized that everyone around her had their gazes fixed on her body. Yu Aoqing was startled at first before she slowly said, "The power of Jian Wushuang is far more terrifying than we thought. Senior brother Zishan and I, along with junior brother Yen who formed the 4-elephant formation, attacked him together. But we were all defeated. Junior brother Yen and the rest were beheaded by him on the spot. Subsequently, almost 50 first-class divine demons attacked him at the same time, but they were still unable to kill him. I found an opportunity to strike the most perfect attack but failed to kill him. I was then forced to crush the safety token to escape. Yu Ouching recounted everything she knew. The many experts around fell silent. Junior sister Ouching, you meant that when you joined forces with Zishan and the others, not only did all of you fail to kill Jian Wushuang, but were also defeated by Jian Wushuang. What's worse was that junior brother Yen and the others died in Jian Wushuang's hands. Tu Qianqing furrowed his brows tightly. Yes. Yu Ouching nodded slightly. Bastard. Tu Qianqing was infuriated. Jian Wushuang. Oh, Jian Wushuang. Han Yun and the few peak divine demons of the Great Compassion sect were also furious. Exasperated, the others around were secretly clicking their tongues. Earlier on, Jian Wushuang had killed Pang Tao. He then killed 4 other first-class divine demons disciples of the Great Compassion sect. Their hatred was growing. Everyone continued to wait. Not long after, several figures appeared at the same time. All of those people were some of the sect's first-class divine demons' genius disciples. Their appearance attracted the experts' attention present. Thereafter, whoosh, 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 many more figures emerged. Around 20 people had left the tomb using their safety token. What's wrong? Those experts were taken aback. Whoosh, whoosh, 2 more figures emerged. This is Huanchen? Huiyang. Both of them also left the tomb? What's the matter? Everyone was still trying to figure out what had just happened. A light flickered and Long Zishan from the Great Compassionate sect emerged from the tomb. Han Yun immediately stepped forward and asked, Zishan, what the hell is going on? Didn't you guys besiege Jian Wushuang together? Why are you out now? Where is Jian Wushuang? Elder Han Yun, senior brother Qianqing, we are incompetent. We did team up to besiege Jian Wushuang, but Jian Wushuang was simply a huge freak. He had no weak points and we could not do anything to him. At last, he used a special domain-type method to trap and subdue all of us before killing us one by one. Those of us who besieged him were either forced to crush the safety token or die in his hands. Long Zishan poured out bitterly. In other words, nearly 50 first-class divine demons who joined forces were single-handedly defeated by Jian Wushuang? Han Yun looked over in disbelief. Yes. Long Zishan bowed his head in shame when he answered. On the glade, all the other sects were also asking some of their disciples who came out of the tombs about what had happened. All of them received a unanimous answer. Many genius disciples joined in the mob attack but failed to kill Jian Wushuang. In return, all of them suffered a miserable defeat. There were around 50 first-class divine demon genius disciples and nearly half of them were beheaded by Jian Wushuang. The rest were forced to crush their safety token and reappeared on the glade. Many sects present were angry when informed of the result. In a corner of the glade, Second Elder, did you hear that? Elder Wujin looked charged. Elder Lingyi nodded with his eyes narrowed. I heard it. I didn't expect this kid to survive under the siege of so many first-class divine demon disciples. He even defeated those first-class divine demons in a head-on battle. That's really incredible. However, that also means he has offended even more sections. Those sects must have hated him even more, said the 7th elder that was standing aside coldly. Indeed, although Jian Wushuang had killed many before, most were only second-class divine demons, not the best genius disciples of the sections. On the other hand, around 20 first-class divine demons were killed in the recent battle. Those 20 first-class divine demons were seen as their sect's treasures. It was no doubt that the sects would develop deep hatred and hostility against Jian Wushuang. On the glade, the 3 Narcissus Island elders could see that many sects were gnashing their teeth. Their eyes filled with the burning flames of hatred and anger. I will report this to the Lord, and he shall decide on what to do, said Elder Lingyi, who immediately left off. After some time, the Lord of Narcissus Island responded. The decision is made, announced Elder Lingyi solemnly. Both Elder Wujin and the 7th elder immediately turned to look at Elder Lingyi. Elder Lingyi took a deep breath before standing up to face the many experts. "Can I have your attention, please?" The magnificent voice of Elder Lingyi echoing over the entire glade. All the experts gave Elder Lingyi their attention. Their eyes were cold as they stared at Elder Lingyi. That was understandable. After all, Jian Wushuang, who was from Narcissus Island, had killed so many genius disciples in the tomb. With that, he had gotten on the wrong side of those sects. It was obvious that those sects would channel their anger and hatred towards Narcissus Island. Elder Lingyi pulled himself up taller and solemnly said, "Everyone, although Jian Wushuang comes from Narcissus Island, he has not been with us for a long time. He has always been very low-key, not showing much of his capabilities. We don't know that he's capable of being so cruel and committing such heinous acts. Such a person is not worthy to be a disciple of Narcissus Island. Hence, after discussing with the elders, we have decided to expel him from Narcissus Island. From now on, Narcissus Island will no longer be held accountable for his conduct and behavior. We would not be responsible for his life or death. We would also like to humbly apologize for all the troubles and pains that he has caused in the saint's tomb. We are sorry for the losses that all of you have encountered due to his frantic killing." All the experts scoffed in their hearts after hearing Elder Lingyi's words. They squint their eyes dismissively. At least, Narcissus Island is sensible. The Lord of Narcissus Island is not stupid. Knowing that Jian Wushuang has caused public outrage, he would be gambling the fate of Narcissus Island if he chooses to defend Jian Wushuang. That would have taken a toll on Narcissus Island's foundation. The Lord doesn't have the courage to do so. I heard that Jian Wushuang is just an outer disciple of Narcissus Island. He doesn't have much sense of belonging to Narcissus Island. Of course, Narcissus Island will not be so stupid as to offend many sects for the sake of an outer disciple. Since Narcissus Island has drawn a clear line with Jian Wushuang, then just let them off. Otherwise, those experts were secretly discussing with each other. None of them thought that Narcissus Island had made the wrong move and showed no contemptuousness over the decision made. In fact, they were no longer holding grudges against Narcissus Island after the announcement was made. They would be after Jian Wushuang for what he had done. Jian Wushuang was quite pitiful. After he was pulled into the catastrophe, Narcissus Island, which should have given him protection, did not hesitate to abandon him. In the tomb, the remaining genius disciples no longer dared to attack Jian Wushuang after witnessing the defeat of Huan Chun, Long Zishan, and the others. They knew full well that they were incapable. After all, there were less than 20 first-class divine demons left in the tomb. Though there were still a large number of second-class divine demons, they were harmless to Jian Wushuang without a strong formation technique. In turn, they began to leave the space, keeping out of Jian Wushuang's way. On the hill that had been stained with blood, Jian Wushuang sat there alone with his legs folded underneath him on the ground covered with potholes. No one dared to stay within the range of his soul power. The continuous killing in the saint's tomb had earned Jian Wushuang the killer and demon title. No one dared to rub on the wrong way. Right at that moment, Jian Wushuang, Elder Wujian, sent him a message. With a trace of guilt, he related to Jian Wushuang the decision Narcissus Island made. "So, they kicked me out of the sect?" Jian Wushuang muttered to himself, but his complexion did not change much from beginning to end. He was not surprised by the decision. He knew he had wreaked havoc in the saint's tomb after killing so many genius disciples and angered so many sects. Narcissus Island was one of the top sects in the Wuxia wasteland. Then again, they were afraid to have a falling out with so many sects at once. What was worse was he knew the higher-ups of Narcissus Island probably figured he did not have much sense of belonging to Narcissus Island. That being the case, why would Narcissus Island risk offend so many sects to protect him? Only by expelling him from the sect and allowing the various sects to deal with Jian Wushuang would Narcissus Island be able to stay out of the troubles. Not only did Jian Wushuang not complain about Narcissus Island's decision, he even thought that it was a good thing. Once again, he did not belong to any sect and would no longer be subjected to any restrictions. Jian Wushuang, Narcissus Island is wrong to do that, but Elder Wujian was feeling guilty. Jian Wushuang interrupted. "Elder Wujian, I can understand this. I will not hate Narcissus Island for what has been decided. From now on, I no longer have any relationship with Narcissus Island. However, between you and I, we can still be friends. Elder Wujin was startled before slowly nodding. By the way, where are my parents? Jian Wushuang asked. Don't worry. Although you are no longer a disciple of Narcissus Island, I can still do some things for you as an elder of Narcissus Island. I can't bring your parents to Narcissus Island, but I'll definitely make sure that they are safe, said Elder Wujin reassuringly. That's good. Jian Wushuang nodded. They soon ended the conversation and broke off contact. Right then, a faint black air current condensed in front of Jian Wushuang, and a blurred figure slowly appeared in front of him. The aura of the vague figure was unique. The figure was studying Jian Wushuang with interest through his strange-looking eyes. Old man, you finally show up? Jian Wushuang raised his head with a sword light glowing in his eyes that instantly turned into a violent bolt of lightning, aiming directly at the blurred figure. The blurred figure raised his hand slightly, grabbing the lightning with his bare hand and squeezed it. The shot of lightning burst in his hand. Young man, don't be so grumpy. Let's talk nicely. A faint laughter peal came out from the corner of the blurred figure's mouth, which sounded old. What's there to talk between you and me? Jian Wushuang was indifferent. Although it was the first time that he saw that blurred figure, he knew the identity of the latter. Crimson Stone Saint. He was the owner of the tomb who remained in the tomb. He had been controlling the consciousness of Crimson Stone Saints. Jian Wushuang had long speculated that Crimson Stone Saint's consciousness was hiding somewhere in the tomb, secretly observing everything that happened. The Crimson Stone Saint probably had already been eyeing him when he passed the 8th Trial Bridges test at the Abyss of Trials. In the ensuing position token battles, 3 seat tokens appeared at the same time in an area with 2 of them delivered directly to him. Jian Wushuang knew there and then that it was a deliberate act of Crimson Stone Saint so that those genius disciples would attack him. It led to the subsequent killings and madness which he had offended all the sects within Wuxia wilderness. After Jian Wushuang crushed all threats in the tomb and proved his strength to those genius disciples, the Crimson Stone Saint finally appeared in front of him. Boy, you were born in Wuxia wilderness and I've done quite a fair bit in Wuxia wilderness. In any case, I am your senior. You don't talk very nicely to an elder, do you? Crimson Stone Saint commented. Sorry, I can't be nice to someone who plots against me, said Jian Wushuang coldly. Plot? I've just given you the position tokens which all of you yearned for. That was obviously a good intention. How can you say that I've plotted against you? The Crimson Stone Saint gave a weak smile. I don't have time to argue with you. Just tell me, what do you want from me now? Jian Wushuang asked impatiently. He obviously did not like Crimson Stone Saint. Well, I'll be straightforward. It's very simple. I see that you are extremely talented and have great potential, so I would like to take you as my personal disciple. I wonder if you would agree, Crimson Stone Saint said with a smile. Jian Wushuang was stirred as he said, Take me as your personal disciple? Well, you ought to know that I am good with the swords. Of course, I know. It's not necessarily for disciples to follow the same path as their masters. I'm not proficient in sword techniques, but I have a good knowledge of the space-time law. I can teach you a lot, said Crimson Stone Saint. He was right, an Undying Saint expert must have known a lot of things. Even if he was not good with sword principles, he was still qualified to teach the sword principle geniuses. As for Jian Wushuang, he was not merely a genius. He was simply a monster, a big monster. Even Crimson Stone Saint had never come across such a terrifying monster in his life before. That was why he wanted to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. He believed that he was not the only one. Many Undying Saint experts would not hesitate to take Jian Wushuang as their disciples if they saw Jian Wushuang's capabilities with their own eyes. Crimson Stone Saint intended to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. He also believed that if he made an appearance, Jian Wushuang would be stoked of the opportunity that lay before him and agreed without hesitation. However, Jian Wushuang shook his head without a second thought. Sorry, I refuse. The Crimson Stone Saint was not annoyed. Instead, he tried to persuade. Little guy, you might want to think carefully. Although I'm dead now, I was an undying saint after all. I have a lot of good stuff left for my personal disciple, including the Fengtian scroll. If you agree to become my personal disciple, it'll be beneficial to you. In addition, even if you don't care about the things I left behind, you have to think about your current situation. You have killed too many genius disciples in my tomb and must have offended many sects. The experts who are waiting outside the tomb would probably chop you into pieces as soon as you walk out of this tomb. Well, if you agree to be my personal disciple, I'll help you solve those experts waiting for you out there. After all, how can I watch my disciple being harmed as the master? Crimson Stone Saint was rather confident. He believed that he would be able to convince Jian Wushuang. Obviously, he underestimated Jian Wushuang. The treasures he left behind were indeed precious and were enough to spark the interest of countless genius disciples in Wuxia wilderness. But Jian Wushuang was definitely not one of them. An undying saint had a godlike existence in the Wuxia wilderness. At least, they were respectable in the eyes of many Wuxia wilderness cultivators. Nonetheless, Jian Wushuang was different. He was reincarnated to undergo cultivation. His previous life was in the eternal chaotic world. He had not only seen an undying saint, he even battled before with the legendary realm lord. Whereas, in his current life, he was born as the second perfect chaotic creature and had endless potential. That being said, he probably would not care much about an undying saint. Hence, being the disciple of an undying saint did not appear attractive to Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was facing an extremely dangerous situation. He was aware that Narcissus Island had completely drawn a line with him and all the other sects would be waiting for him out there in the glade. But he was never afraid. He would find a way to solve the turmoils he stirred up and not depend on others to save him. Besides, the storm was arranged by Crimson Stone Saint with the purpose of forcing Jian Wushuang to be his disciple. Crimson Stone Saint would have succeeded in his plan had Jian Wushuang agreed. Why would Jian Wushuang be willing to do that? Old man, let's not mention that you are dead and only your consciousness is still lingering around today. Even if you are still alive and at your peak, I'll never agree to be your personal disciple, because an undying saint like you are not qualified to be my master, sneered Jian Wushuang. He was speaking out his mind from the bottom of his heart. He had only one master since he started his cultivation journey, and that master was Xianxia. Who exactly was Xianxia? He was the first perfect chaotic creature born in the heavens and earth. He relied on his own powers to climb to the top of the ancient god realm such that even the dignified realm lord had to bow to Master Xianxia. That was his master, Crimson Stone Saint, an old man who was dead for so many years and had just attained the status of an ordinary undying saint during his lifetime. Jian Wushuang did not think much of him. Of course, besides his strength, the most important point was Crimson Stone Saint's unscrupulous process in recruiting disciples. Jian Wushuang might have considered the offer had he openly shown up and mentioned his desire to recruit Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. Jian Wushuang did not bother to pay him any attention because he had been playing tricks on Jian Wushuang and forcing Jian Wushuang to submit to his offer. The Crimson Stone Saint narrowed his eyes hearing Jian Wushuang's reply but kept his silence. After a long silence, the Crimson Stone Saint spoke again. Young people nowadays are becoming more and more arrogant. Well, since you are not willing, I'll not force you. You will have to take care of your mess from now on. Good luck. Crimson Stone Saint smiled and his figure dissipated. Jian Wushuang looked at the place where the Crimson Stone Saint dissipated into thin air with a strange expression. That old fart left just like that? An undying saint should be very concerned about his face. But he did not hesitate to plot against me just to recruit me as his disciple? What's his purpose? Jian Wushuang thought that Crimson Stone Saint must have his personal agenda to take him as his personal disciple. Nevertheless, he could not figure out his intentions. Oh well, I hope he doesn't pull my leg during Fengtian Scroll Enlightenment and Divine Power Ocean, murmured Jian Wushuang before closing his eyes. In that hidden independent space, the Crimson Stone Saint's vague silhouette appeared. I can't believe he turned me down? The Crimson Stone Saint was quite surprised. He never thought that Jian Wushuang would so bluntly refuse his offer after he personally went forward to invite him. He was not stingy with his offer. Moreover, Jian Wushuang was not in a good position. If I'm right, he refused because he has absolute confidence in his own strength or talent. He wants to use the next two major opportunities, Fengtian Scroll and Divine Power Ocean, to increase his strength and face the experts from the various sects outside the tomb. Yes, that should be the case. Crimson Stone Saint murmured as he had also figured out Jian Wushuang's mind. If that's the case, I will have to see how much progress he can make with those two opportunities. If he has not made much progress and could not face the various sects' strong experts outside the tomb, he would show up to offer his help. He was certain that Jian Wushuang would beg him to take Jian Wushuang as his personal disciple. And if he is really talented, if his strength soars with the help of those two opportunities, I will definitely accept him as a personal disciple. There was a gleam of excitement in Crimson Stone Saint's eyes. Jian Wushuang is a super genius. If he will become my personal disciple, he will definitely excel with his great potential. It will be a breeze for him to become an ultimate god in the future. There is also a great chance of him becoming an undying saint. Once he is an undying saint, he would definitely be ranked highly among the undying saints, perhaps even stronger than the purple blood at his peak. Such a strong expert would become Su Er's right-hand man if he's willing to sincerely help,